I guess in my 52-year railroad career, I have walked to the moon and back on railroad platforms just like this in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And I've come to know there are a lot of untold stories and even a few secrets out there involving the railroad industry. Please join us and subscribe so we can continue to bring you those untold stories and even a few secrets from America's railroad past.
All aboard! Highball it, Eagle!
Have you heard the travel news about the Eagle Way? To your destination happening every day. The Texas Eagle is clicking on the rail. From the Windy City to the Alamo, meet you at the station, come on, let's go. People get ready and catch the wave. Catch the wave, the Texas Eagle Way. Through the heart of the nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm recording a special introduction to this particular podcast. This podcast is all about railroad art and railroad artistry, and it even spawned a special commission in railroad art. I'm speaking in particular about my good friend J. Craig Thorpe, who is notably America's premier railroad artist today, in many's opinion, including mine, and arguably the most famous railroad artist in the world. His productivity and his talent is absolutely remarkable. I've known Mr. Thorpe since 2010, but when my dear friend Mark Kane, former president of Amtrak Intercity, who has been a previous guest on this podcast, recommended that I do Mr. Thorpe, I had no idea that our friendship would develop into an actual painting. And I want to give you a brief background on that. Many of you have been or know about Joey Smith's annual birthday parties at New Boston, Texas, and the barbecue and the fireworks display, and even many of you have been in attendance. The 2024 event hosted 183 people. And we began to realize that no painting and certainly no color portrayal of the original Texas and Pacific Railway depot at New Boston, Texas, had ever been attempted. So when the Hubbard Watlington Foundation realized this was the case, it commissioned Mr. Thorpe to paint the T&P Railway depot at New Boston, Texas, as it might have looked in 1918, and to tell the story of this particular day. And this painting was commissioned as a gift to the city of New Boston. So for those of you who might want to see it up close, visit the city, and I'm sure they'll be able to accommodate you. While we look at the painting, I want to read you the factual history of what it depicts on this summer day in 1918. On a typical hot and humid late August summer morning in 1918, Anna Mae Adams departed Texas Women's University at Denton and boarded eastbound Texas and Pacific Railway Transcontinental Division train number 32, destined for a position as the new schoolmarm at New Boston. About midday, James Hubbard, founder and chairman of the First National Bank and president of the local school board, instructed his eldest son, Augustus Griffin, to meet the afternoon train and welcome the untested headmistress to town. Following his father's orders, Gus went over to the Hubbard Brothers department store on Front Street and borrowed his Uncle Rob's showy Palomino pony for the big event. Robert Moss Hubbard would soon become the first full-term chairman of what matured into the Texas Transportation Commission and was later a popular state representative from the 1st District. Governor Miriam A. Maul Ferguson would say that Uncle Rob pulled Texas out of the mud. On time at 6:28 p.m., TNP Railway number 32 arrived at the New Boston Depot, and Gus and Anna Mae's eyes clashed for the first time, while the Crystal Palace Saloon drayage went about its business of replenishing the product. For Gus, it was love at first sight, and he dropped to one knee at train-side with a proposal of marriage. She thought him to be a handsome, arrogant fool. His persistence in plopping Uncle Rob's pony's head through the schoolroom window during class finally overcame her protestations, and the couple married in March 1920. The turbulent and on-again, off-again wedlock survived more than 50 years, with Gus and his childhood neighbor, H. Ross Perot Sr., establishing a lifelong relationship in the cotton brokerage business. The Holy Union with Anna Mae also occasioned a son, James Robert Hubbard, who went on to become a railroad lawyer, Texas State District Judge, and trial attorney with a national legacy to the American jurisprudence system, and a grandson, James Griffin Hubbard, who spent 6 decades in the service of the railroad industry, a career beginning on, of course, the transcontinental division of the Texas and Pacific Railway through New Boston, Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my podcast, I've Seen Some Trains Before. Thank you for joining us once again. Griff Hubbard here, as I have been with you for the past dozen or so podcasts. We have a brand new one here, perhaps one that is more interesting to more varied viewers than any one I've done in the past. We have the esteemed and quite nationally, perhaps even internationally famous railroad artist J. Craig Thorpe with us today to discuss a myriad of topics about railroad art. And again, Mr. Thorpe, thank you for your time and your interest in joining us today. I know this is going to be a popular podcast, and I would like to begin like how I began most of these podcasts, and that's learning a little bit about you. Where are you from originally?
Well, as I get into that, I just want to say to you, thank you very much for setting up this interview and for enabling my art and my ideas to be disseminated. I really appreciate this a lot. So thank you a lot. Now, then to transition into your first question. Well, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That was home for me, Steel City.
Wow, okay. And did you spend most of your adolescence there?
Yeah, actually, I lived there until I went off to the Army right after college. I went through college at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. So I was well grounded in that Western Pennsylvania area. And of course, the railroading was thrilling for a kid.
I was going to say, you personify the name of this podcast. You've seen some trains before if you grew up in the Pittsburgh metro area.
Tell me about it.
Well, how in heaven's name did you go from the Northeast to the Pacific Northwest?
Well, it was a job change that actually brought me to the Pacific Northwest. And I don't know how much detail you want me to go back into, but your audience might be interested in knowing. As I said, I went to Carnegie Mellon University, and I'm going to come back and show you a piece of artwork that I did while I was there, because that really is foundational to where I am today. At any rate, I moved to Virginia after college to get in the Army. I was ROTC, Transportation Corps lieutenant. Happily, the Army had too many officers. Can you believe it? And even though Vietnam was still happening, they told us that they were giving us a chance to get out of the military, get off of active duty. So I did not think, but maybe for a second or two about that, and decided I'd take them up on their offer. So I worked for architects and landscape architects in Virginia. Then I went to graduate school in New England and came west from there for a job.
Okay, so this could be a whole nother podcast in itself, but I'm going to guess that you are no stranger to Fort Eustis, Virginia, the Army Transportation Corps base, or
That's,
was.
that's right. Yeah. That's right.
Wow. Wow. So forgive my ignorance in asking this question, but during our preliminary interview yesterday in off screen, just talking about what to ask, I should have thought to ask this question. So your primary occupation of your youth was not an artist full time. You were doing something else and artwork.
As a kid or as a young adult, which?
Both. Both.
Well, this might be a good time to go back to the college years and
Okay.
a little bit of even the preliminaries. I brought along a painting which will be recognized by a number of people.
Yes.
It's from another Griff.
Yes.
This is a Griff Teller piece for one of the Pensy calendars. Most of your audience will probably know who he was. Griff Teller was the noted illustrator for the Osborne Company, a New Jersey-based firm, and their prime client was the Pennsylvania Railroad. So Griff did paintings annually for 27 of the, I think it was 31 years or whatever, something like that, that the Osborne Company was employed by the Pensy. So as a child, my family got calendars, not the big wall calendars that Griff is most noted for, but little desktop calendars. But I was enthralled with that. And I was an artist as a kid, you know, my little pencil and I hated crayons, but I did them anyway. At any rate, that was sort of the beginning for me of this art development and the railroad as another major theme. So I admired Griff Teller's work and thought, boy, that would be really cool to be able to be a railway artist. I had no idea how one could ever chart a path in that direction. So when I got ready for college, I chose industrial design as the major for me at Carnegie Mellon, was accepted and got into that program. So my senior year in high school, I had done a report about Pittsburgh District, and I sort of created a transportation system, hypothetical, and had drawings and maps and all this stuff. Well, I still had a copy of it, and I used that to sort of leverage a job at Carnegie Mellon with Transportation Research Institute. That was a HUD-funded think tank within the engineering department at Carnegie Mellon, and I got a job. I was the local gopher. So over the course of my college career, I worked 3 summers full-time with TRI, and then during the school year, I put in some time there too.
So this is fascinating. Your graduate degree then is in industrial design also?
Correct.
Okay.
But I've never done it.
Okay, so when you came out of graduate school, how did you support yourself?
Well, I'll get to that, but can I go back to TRI for just a minute?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, because this is really part of the story. There are stories within stories, and my time at CMU and at TRI is really crucial to who Craig is now and has been. So I was doing artwork, mostly maps for TRI, and then they decided, oh, this kid can draw, so they had me do some architectural style renderings. And the project that we were focusing on was something known as the Transit Expressway, also known as the Skybus, and probably some of your listeners here will remember hearing about that. It was an automated kind of transit system, computer-controlled, guideway, guided, elevated, not terribly attractive, boxy cars, short, and TRI was very much supporter of the Skybus. So even though Pittsburgh still had streetcars at that point, there was this move toward something new and upgraded, and the feeling was that Skybus would put Pittsburgh on the international transit map like nothing else. So they had me do these renderings, and here is one of them. It's the last one that exists out of a whole series.
Well, and you did that as a high school student.
But this was it was the summer after my high school graduation.
Okay. Wow.
And we had this, if you look at it closely, I'm really getting 60s era cars and 60s era illustration work in there. I was reflecting what the art du jour was. Anyway, this was one of a series that was done for TRI. And I was thrilled to be able to do that, to experiment as an artist and put it into a transportation context. But I didn't have a particular love for Skybus. And so here's an interesting event that happened. I felt that Skybus was cold and impersonal and just that we could do better. Well, one afternoon, I was going home from school, from TRI, and I had a stack of these drawings under my arm, and I had a pocket full of pencils stuffed into the pocket protector I had. Total nerdy guy here, and a few other art supplies. I was running to catch the bus, and my foot caught on the streetcar track on Forbes Avenue, and I started stumbling forward. And as I did, all of the pencils in my pocket took flight in this grand expanding arch of pencils that went all over Forbes Avenue. Talk about embarrassed, It was like the Southwest Airlines commercials, want to get away? Yeah, I wanted to get away. And I was ready to run, and my eye caught the eye of a streetcar motorman. He'd come up to the crossing there and was just waiting for the light to change when my pencils and I went flying across the street. So he looked at me and a big smile on his face, and he made a gesture like, "Don't worry, kid. Just take a moment and pick up your pencils." So I sort of smiled back, and so I retrieved my pencils, and I retrieved some degree of demeanor, and got out of the way, and he carried on with the streetcar. And I started to reflect on what had happened there. And I thought, this kind of thing was very personal. It was human. It was a connection. That would never happen with an automated train. Now, the situation, the infrastructure was different, of course. But my point was, there's something impersonal and not at all real about this Skybus thing. But what just happened with that trolley and that trolley operator was exceedingly present and exceedingly real. That was a transformational moment for me, because I realized there was something about the railroad, or in this case, a streetcar, that was very inviting and very affirming, very human in the best of ways. So that was one of those events. What happened at the end of that summer was very interesting. During that summer, all those paintings were distributed around Pittsburgh, and they were in the newspaper and other places, in store windows, and everybody was celebrating Skybus. They even built a test loop at the Allegheny County Fair to promote this thing. At the end of the summer, all the drawings came back to me, except the best one. And mine, the one that I showed you a minute ago, was one of the series that came back, but the best one never did. I have no idea where it was. In a sort of a cynical way, I sort of suspect that maybe one of the people from TRI Five Finger discounted it and took it. They saw something in it. But I read it. I turned that, instead of feeling sorry for myself, I turned it around and said, if indeed somebody walked off with that, it might imply that they think I have a future as a railway artist.
Surely. Okay.
So I put a different spin on it, and that was the beginning.
Wow. I love the human interest, the human interaction with the motorman. What a wonderful, wonderful vignette. Okay, back to that original question. So when you graduated, when you exited graduate school with your master's in industrial design, so what field did you immediately go into?
Well, technically, it wasn't industrial design. It was Master of Divinity because I went to Gordon Seminary and I kind of thought maybe, well, I don't want to go into ministry, but I thought, this space thing is real. Maybe I ought to just kind of be a little better informed as a church guy. So I thought, all right, and I was able to arrange that. So I came away from that with a MDiv, and at that point it seemed like the next step in the process, which I won't go into, it's much too long, was jump through some Presbyterian hoops. So that's what I did. And so I came to Seattle as an assistant pastor.
Master of Divinity. Okay,
Yeah.
assistant pastor in the Presbyterian faith.
Yeah, at Seattle First Presbyterian Church.
Okay. So, wow, what a fantastic and interesting background. So, let me digress for a second.
Please.
Did you wake up one morning in your childhood and say, I say this in most of the podcasts that I have done, I have been amazed, absolutely amazed at the number of people I have interviewed who have said not all of them, but the majority have said in childhood, I knew I wanted to be a railroad man or a railroad woman. Did that happen to you in your youth where you said, I want to be connected in railroad design or railroad artistry? Was that ever a conscious thought of your youth?
Oh, it certainly was. So to add me to that side of the ledger.
All right.
Absolutely. And I remember where I was. I was sitting on the couch in our sun porch, we called it, and I was looking at Trains magazines, and there was a Gil Reed painting of a streetcar. And I think it was a Chicago, Aurora, and Elgin car. I'm not totally clear on that memory, but I distinctly remember that. And you see, that followed all of the Griff Teller stuff. So the Teller stuff was a little bit earlier. And then
let me bookmark that thought there. Now, Griff Teller was one of your mentors.
I never met the chap
Okay,
as an adult, but as a kid, I admired those paintings.
Well,
even before that,
go ahead.
Even before that, I squirreled away as many Christmas cards that had trains on them, as my parents would get those things at Christmas. I squirreled those away, and then I'd copy them, and I do that sort of. So that was where the railroad art and where all that sort of came together. But I distinctly remember that sitting on the couch looking at that Trains magazine with that Gil Reed drawing in it and think, I want to do that.
So Griff Teller was mentoring you without his knowledge as a youth. You were fascinated by his good works.
That's right.
His talents. Okay. So you are an assistant minister at First Presbyterian in Seattle. Take us from there.
Well, I did that gig for about 5 years, and then the Presbytery had me kick off a new church start in one of the suburbs on the east side of the greater Seattle area. And it's a humorous story where I had a sense at one point, the Almighty saying to me, Greg, you're going to go back into the so-called secular world. No division really, but you're going to go back into what people consider the secular world, probably in art. And I wanted nothing to do with that. I was at a dinner meeting with some other people, and somebody was talking about his story, and that had been his role. He had been in a parish work, and then had gone back into doing some other something else. And when he was talking, I had this sense that the same thing was going to happen to me. And in a very faith-filled immediate response, I said, "The hell it is. I'm not leaving this church thing. This is my calling." Well, yes, it was in a short term, but didn't have the smarts nor the wisdom to realize that we are in life called through things more than just to things. So I eventually had to come to grips with that, and I moved through that. And after those church events, I started my own architectural art business because I had the skills from those years in Virginia doing architectural and landscape architecture stuff. That was before the seminary bit. So I had enough skill and connection. So that's what I did. I just sort of started my own architectural art business.
Okay, so in the 5 years or so that you were active in the ministry, was artistry a hobby? I mean, did you paint and did you draw in those years? Just on.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I couldn't keep that down. I couldn't push that aside. It was one of those things that just kept intruding into my world, and I gave energy to it.
It was your passion?
Interestingly, yes. Now I saw that the work that I was doing mostly was stuff within the presbytery and the church, so it was related. But and I didn't do a whole lot of railroad stuff at that point. But the point that I eventually came to realize was that I could not run away from art.
Wow. Probably a master of the universe, needle and thread in all of this. I love that part of the story. Okay, so you're in the Pacific Northwest, and you have I don't know that I know what that is, an architectural art design. Tell me what you said you opened, and what is that?
Architectural illustrator or architectural renderer.
Okay.
So that's where a person draws a concept drawing or painting of what a building or a site will look like. So it's a concept, working from blueprints, floor plans, and so on.
Okay, is this correct? In my mind's eye, I picture the first thing that comes to my mind is when the city of where I live, the city of Longview, Texas, bought the original Texas and Pacific Railway Depot and fully restored it in 2014. And before the restoration ever took place, there was this wonderful pen and ink drawing of what it would look like, and even where the trees would be placed, and where the parking spaces would be. Am I in the right direction? Is that what this is?
You're only about 100% correct.
Okay, good.
Yes, exactly.
See, I always thought the architect did that. I don't know why. I just figured that's who did those things.
Well, sometimes that is the case.
Okay.
But many times architects will hire illustrators to be on their staff. Not so much now because of short amount of money and a lot of other issues, but back then, yeah. So that's where I learned this trade while I was in Virginia before seminary. So I was able to develop a style, and that's what led to that, this thing that I showed you.
Yes.
That's what got all that going. So you had used the example of the railway station. Was it Texarkana, you said?
Longview.
Well, it was sort of absolute parallel situation out here. I had done some railway paintings as a part of just because I wanted to do them, and I showed them to a chap who was the proprietor of a hobby shop, railway hobby shop, and he said, "Oh, I got to tell you," he said, "there's a nonprofit group here now in Olympia, Washington, that's state capital. They're wanting to build a new Amtrak station because all that's there now is a three-sided shack, and that's not suitable for the capital city of Washington State." So he said, I'm going to give you the name of the dude who's the project manager. You ought to talk to him because maybe he'd like to have a drawing of that new building. So I did. I got the name. I called the fellow. Bob Bregent is his name. Just saw him yesterday, in fact. And he decided we'd get together and talk. And he could immediately understand what I was saying, that an architectural illustration is going to help you interpret this building to people who can't read blueprints. They can't see it. They don't get it. But a painting is going to do that. Wow. So he proceeded to take my ideas and present them to their committee, which promptly shot it down. They didn't want anything to do with it because he said, we don't have the money for art. We don't need art. We need drawing. We need architects. And Bob said, no, you don't. Yes, we do. No, we went back and forth, and they wouldn't budge. So he said, to heck with you. I'll commission the painting on my own. So he did. And it showed the building, and I worked with the architectural plans and elevations that they had accrued by that point and produced the painting. And so Bob was thrilled with it. He, with the local printer, volunteered to make, I don't know, two 2,500 copies for free. And Bob started handing those out. Pardon me. And they sold some, they made money. They actually ended up raising about $8,500 toward the project by selling prints. But here's the kicker. Bob was a real intense sort of chap, and he was able to go to folks who were offering, building materials and so on, and he talked them into donating material and labor, and they made $360,000 to $365,000 in kind labor and material.
Wow!
And the rendering, the painting that I did, made that happen. So that's how it all started.
Okay, so it is safe to say that this is the painting of the architectural illustration of the Amtrak station at Olympia, Washington, was your entry into what now has become a legacy of railroad artwork. Is that a safe comment?
Yes, it is. That's right, Griff. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, this begs the broader question. Then, see, in my mind's eye, and I don't think this is a stretch to say, you are today's artist to the railroad industry, freight and passenger. So, where was that first big step where the Santa Fe called you, or in those days the Burlington Northern, or another major carrier? What was that first big step where even Amtrak called you and said, we want to commission this?
Well, it was Amtrak.
Okay, it was Amtrak.
Yes, and here's how it happened.
Okay.
The painting that I did showed the Pioneer, which no longer exists. That's Seattle train east. That showed the Pioneer southbound in front of this new building at Olympia.
Oh, okay.
Well, that was in 1992, I guess, or 91, I guess, is when I actually did the painting. The following summer, early, I was in Washington, D.C. to meet with Bruce Hurd, who worked for Amtrak. You may know that name.
I know Mr. Hurd, yes.
Yes, and Bruce was working with Cliff Black and others under Graham Claytor in the Special Projects division or department. I don't know how they defined it exactly. And I had been introduced to Bruce and wanted to meet him. So I took copies of the Olympia painting with me to that meeting. And I gave those to Bruce, and I said, I don't know whether there ever would be a chance to do paintings for you, because I know that Gil Reed is a friend of Graham Claytor's, and that he had a working relationship. But Bruce was very gracious, and he took those images and set them aside. So I continued on with my trip and other things, and which, interestingly, parenthetical comment, that's where I met Griff Teller on that trip for the first time.
Okay.
That's another story. So what happened with this Amtrak thing was in, I guess it was August of 92, Bruce called me out of the blue one day and he said, I have a problem. Gil Reed is ill. He cannot fulfill the commission for the 93 calendar. And he said, all I could think of was call Craig, call Craig. He said, could we work out a deal where we use the Olympia painting on the calendar and pay you a use fee for it? We don't have time to start from scratch.
Surely.
So, does it rain in Seattle? That, yes, indeed. And so I said, yes. So that was the beginning of that relationship. So I had the painting photographed and then sent to Bruce, and they used it on the 1993 national calendar. That's what opened the door. Shortly thereafter, you will remember, and others too, that the X2000 did a national tour. The X2000 was the Swedish, the ABB built train for Sweden, the active tilt train, and it did a US tour. So I found out about this, and through some contacts here in Seattle, was introduced to the folks at ABB and to Master Communications Group in Minneapolis. Bill Dean was the head of that. They were the promoters for the national tour. And I introduced myself to Bill and I said, might there be a chance to talk about doing a painting of X2000? And yeah, we did work that out and that happened. So that art went national with the X2000. So that, on top of that Amtrak calendar painting, gave me some real experience and introduced me to a lot of wonderful people.
So your second quote unquote railroad painting was for ABB. Was that a commission from them?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so you're still, I presume your full-time employment is still your architectural illustrating firm, but you're doing commissions on the side. So now that we know how Amtrak contacted you, who was the first Class 1 freight carrier that called you?
Well, I've not had very many commissions from freight carriers, BN being the prime one. And there, I think I need to set out here a couple of priorities that developed in my thinking. The first was my passion was passenger trains.
Okay.
I saw passenger trains and streetcars, light rail, all that stuff as a kid and young adult, and saw that they brought a certain vitality or life to an urban or rural or interurban area. In other words, they contributed to the common good. And even with the Griff Teller paintings, his passenger trains were the ones to which I gravitate.
Yeah, I wholeheartely agree.
Yeah, so I felt that was really necessary. The second thing, you all will realize that there's certainly a rise of interest in historical or nostalgic kind of railroad art. Ted Rose and a lot of other wonderful artists were producing art that fulfilled the needs of people who saw and lamented the passing of steam. Gil Reed and any of them were doing this kind of thing. So as those gentlemen were producing that kind of art, I thought, I don't really want to break into that. I like history. I love the art that they're doing, but I'm thinking that maybe I could bring to the greater cause a focus on what railroads could do with their passenger services. So what's beginning to happen here, Griff, is my shift of taking what I'm learning in the architectural art illustration world for architecture and applying it to the rail world. So I did not want to compete with those gentlemen who were really focusing on nostalgic art, and I'm glad they did, and it's still happening. But I began to see my interest in passenger rail now and in the future, and melding with that the role of art in telling the story and producing an evocative response in the public, not just for what was, but for what could be.
Surely.
Is that clear?
It is. It's inspirationally clear. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your heart with us a little bit there. Yes, it makes perfect sense. So the Burlington Northern was your primary freight carrier, I guess.
Yeah, I've done a couple of pieces for them. Well, another that wasn't early on was General Electric.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Tell us about that.
yeah, that's really a fun set of commissions. I tell people GE does more than make light bulbs,
Right.
and they make good locomotives. So out of the blue, one day I got a phone call from Donna Perino, who was marketing for GE Transportation Systems in Erie, Pennsylvania. And she explained that they wanted to do a series of paintings wherein they would commission painting for each of the class ones who had been ordering the General Electric locomotives.
Okay.
And they would give this original painting to that railway as a thank you for that big order of locomotives. So that started a wonderful series. And I did, at that point, the major class ones, BNSF and Union Pacific, CSX, Norfolk Southern. Did one for Via Rail Canada. I did one for Kazakhstan State Railways, believe it or not.
Wow. Okay.
And all of that was reflecting the GE appreciation to their railway clients. And then Donna had me do a couple of others that were gifts to Jack Welch when he retired from GE. So that was the series.
So it's not a stretch to say that you have an international legacy, particularly with the Kazakhstan railway system. Well, I must know, was the catalyst for the GE series, for example, was that catalyst the Amtrak calendar of 1993? Is that how your name recognition got out there to the industry?
Yes, and the X2000. They're built on each other. The X2000, of course, made national news, whereas in a way that the Amtrak calendar didn't, but it still did had a broad presence. But the X2000, as a European product, with the interest of ABB and others in moving into the national national scene, that they've been picked up on that X2000 painting and began to use it. So there were basically 5 different trains, international trains, that were paraded around the United States in the late 90s. There was the X2000, we had the Talgo train, the IC3 Flexliner, the Siemens Regio Sprinter, the what's another one? The turboliners, French turboliners. So there were all these, and again, building upon the success of those earlier paintings, including the GE paintings, I was able to go to these different builders and secure commissions. So out of those 5 or 6 train sets that came around the U.S., the only one that I did not paint was the Intercity Express, the ICE train from Germany. I had a chance to do all the other ones.
Wow.
So that became sort of a package. And actually, Griff, when I look across the course of my career, although I've done many, many individual commissions, there are a number of these big block commissions that stand out as highlights of my career and of the friendships that developed because of those. But the GE one and then these international locomotives, that was another set.
I have to ask you a personal aside question here. I have one, but of course, well, I have more than one, but I have them in safekeeping, so they're not where I can look at the artist right now. Did you do, and I hope you did, but maybe you didn't, did you do the 1997 Amtrak calendar of the Texas Eagle at Fort Worth?
No,
That was not you. Okay.
no, I think that was Gil Reed
Gil-
or Ted Rose. I think that was a Ted Rose painting. I did 95 and 96 calendars for Amtrak. So there were three in that series. Before then they dropped the calendars. But I was able to do that. And one of them was the international. It used to be the Great Northern, called the Pacific Internationals, that ran
Yes.
from to Vancouver, BC. So Amtrak worked to reestablish that, and that was a big part of the Pacific Northwest Rail Corridor development. And of course, Talgo became the prime supplier of that equipment, the Series 6 and then Series 8 trains. And I had a chance to paint Talgos in probably 6 different settings. So that was a major part of that. Again, a part of that grouping of international imagery.
Seattle to Vancouver, British Columbia, one of the most scenic routes Amtrak offers today.
That's right.
Just, I had the privilege to ride the internationals under the Great Northern Banner, and then in later Amtrak years, and the scenery along Puget Sound is just spectacular.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what's the transition from being an architectural illustrator to a full-time railroad legacy artist? Or has that transition ever occurred? Have you always done both jobs in later years?
The architectural work took a nosedive with the recession in 2008.
Okay.
Almost overnight, the residential art side of that work disappeared, and it didn't take too long for the commercial to disappear as well. And I still, on occasion, do work, but not very much. I do have a meeting later this week with a client to do a architectural site kind of thing. I don't know the details yet, but that's the first of that size that I've had in a couple of years. It just doesn't come around. But as my availability and the message of what my art is has circulated, the railroad art has circulated, people have responded in the rail world. And I don't want to jump too far ahead in your thinking here, but I'll mention this and then bring it up several times later. My art, then my railroad art, began to congeal into 3 different but complementary subjects. Painting the past, and that's the nostalgic art. It's even though Howard Fogg and Ted Rose and others who I mentioned earlier did that, and I found people coming to me for some private commissions of historical themed art. So that then began and is still growing. Then there's painting the present, and that would include the work for Amtrak, the GE paintings, and some other fascinating ones, which I can get into if you wish. And then painting the possible, past, present, and the possible. That's the forward look, what we could have, what we need. So those 3 categories really define and make it easy to group my works.
Would you tell us, sir, the total history, if you will, from the beginning of that marvelous painting behind you? Tell us all about it. Tell it how. Where did is is that Portland, I'm guessing?
Yeah,
Okay.
that
That's
is Portland, Oregon.
Portland Union Station.
Portland Union Station, and this was done for the centennial in, I believe it was, what was it, 1996, 1994, or
The
six.
hundredth anniversary of Portland Union Station.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And here's how it unfolded. It started with with some discussions with the Oregon rail passenger folks, and I began to chat with them about the possibility of a painting. But as that developed, I also found out that the Portland Development Commission was going to oversee the whole 3-day celebration. So I thought I'd go right to the top. And I went to them and I said, here's who I am. Here's, showed them my work and my wares and said, could we talk about a commemorative painting? And they said, well, we've already commissioned something. No, fine, that's your prerogative. May I ask what it is? And they said, yes, we're going to reproduce the blueprints of the tower. And as you can see in the painting behind me, that's the smokestack, but here's the main tower, and that distinctive top, travel by train. So that's what they were going to feature. And it was at that point I went back to the Aorta group, the Portland advocacy group, and said, well, would you be interested in commissioning something? So they did. They said, yes, let's put something together. So we knew that there were going to be steam engines there, and there would be representatives. So basically the story of Portland rail didn't include the interurbans that used to go there, but we really did try to cover the waterfront, so to speak, with the trains that we have. So what I did in the painting here, you can see we have the SP&S 700 here. To this side right here is Union Pacific end car from the Portland Rose, or who knows. But we didn't know what kind of presence Union Pacific would have at this event. But for artistic reasons, we chose that. Then next over is an Amtrak P42 and then the 4449. We knew that the two steam engines would be there. We knew that Amtrak would have a new P42, P40 or on display. So with that information, the folks at the Rail Advocacy Group and I planned this composition, and I put the painting together. And it wasn't a real big painting. Oh, I don't know, not even 8. I think it was probably 16 by 20 or something like that. Not real big, but I did the painting. They liked it. We had posters made, and my oldest son and I went down to Portland and set up for the 3 days that we were going to be there for this event. I was to sell posters. And so shortly after we got there that first morning, I asked about the Portland Development Commission poster. I really did want to see it.
Surely.
And somebody did bring it over, and it really was attractive. It was a reproduction of the tower in blueprint fashion, and had some other material typography at the bottom. I thought it looked nice. But what was fascinating was that I had a queue of people. As soon as I put the paintings up, and I had this enlargement up at that point, had that made, I had a queue of people 20 deep. And it stayed that way virtually for all 3 days. Obviously not at night. But my son was just bug-eyed because we were taking in money, and I was stuffing dollars and $5 and $10 bills in pockets, and my suit coat was bulging, and his pants were bulging with money, and he was rolling posters, and it was like something we couldn't have believed. He was so excited and did such a good job with me on that. I bought him a new boombox as a thank you for
Wonderful.
his effort and expertise. But what's significant about it is this. I began to realize as that first day unfolded, people responded to this in a way that they did not respond to the Portland Development Commission's piece, as nice as it was. And I began to ask why. And getting info back from people and judging from my own observations, people related to this. This is an inviting painting. You want to stand on the platform.
Yes,
You want to smell that hot grease and that smoke and steam and
you know what you know what my very first thought was, Mr. Thorpe? I want to go up to that Union Pacific drumhead on that blunt end observation car, and I want to see if it's the Portland Rose or the city of Portland. That was
Yeah.
my very first thought.
Yep, yep. And so there's what this does, what it did then, is that it confirmed for me the effectiveness of this realism, this realistic art, because people were connecting with it at an emotional level.
Yes.
Kids, they had me set up. Well, right, I was just down under this platform, back about here, and I had this outdoor display with a bunch of other posters and these, and so it was great. Kids there, kids everywhere, and the parents, they could go from my painting over and touch the locomotive, or and get their picture taken there. And so there was this intimacy, and that was one of the first major events where I felt that my perspective about the role of railroad of imagery to tell the railroad story in this day and age was very important. And I felt that it was an affirmation I was on the right track.
Fascinating. Could you tell us, sir, from the time, we'll just use the painting behind you as an example. Do all of your paintings have names?
Most of them do.
Does that have a name behind you?
It was just Portland's Union Station Centennial.
Okay.
But
How, using that as an example, sir, from the day you took the commission until the day you delivered it, how long a time are we? A month, a year, 6 months, 8 months, or does every?
it's just a couple months.
Okay, is every picture different, or is every painting different, or is every painting a couple of months?
A good question. It's a couple of months on the high end and on the low end. It depends on size and complexity, and yeah, and how I'm going to do it. The cover painting for the book is a redo of an earlier painting, and so the time that went into that was much shorter. In fact, why don't I just show it to you?
Please.
Yeah, because I will show the first iteration of this painting later in when we get to slides. But this is Glacier Park, Montana, East Glacier. The original version of this painting showed P-42 locomotives here, and in an earlier paint scheme. Of course, these are the present Siemens Chargers.
Right.
That painting was very popular, and it sold all kinds of posters and cards and other things. And Amtrak used it, and so when I wanted to do the book, I wanted to use a painting, and I wanted Glacier for a number of reasons, but I didn't have time to start a complete new painting. And I liked the message here of the title of this one is Wilderness Threshold. I did not come up with that. One of my colleagues, Al Runty, did it. That was his suggestion. So Wilderness Threshold had this great history, and I liked the station and the lodge and the mountains in the background and all that. The red bus, the classic Glacier red bus. So, but I did have time to just paint new engines in. So I had a reproduction of the original painting made on canvas had it mounted, and then just painted over the P-42s and turned them into Siemens Chargers. So
Wow.
that took just a few days to do that. So
Well, okay. Well, thank you for telling. I would never have suspected that something like that was possible. Sir, to keep from asking a proprietary question, in the broadest sense of the terms, how does one charge for a painting? How do you know that this painting is worth that or that painting is worth this commission? Is it subjective? Is it?
pretty much, and I try to honor if a client is a nonprofit, I will try to give a price that is a little bit lower.
I see. I see. That makes perfect sense. Tell me, sir, what question have I not asked you about the development of J. Craig Thorpe's artistry that I should have so far? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, it really is. How did the philosophy develop? And I think that's worth some interplay here. After those early paintings, that is the Amtrak painting, the X2000 painting, some of the stuff with GE, and some others, I I continued to wrestle with this question: what makes a train special? Many times when I give a lecture, I'll start with a slide that said, I'll ask the audience, have you ever thought this or asked the question, yeah, what makes a train special? Or is there something special about a train? What is it? So that is something that has been a part of my whole journey. I've asked that question in countless contexts. And slowly, I began to get a sense of what that is. What makes the railroad special? What makes a train or trolley cars or interurban special? And it slowly became clear to me that trains were more than just a means to move ourselves and our stuff. We live in a very utilitarian era.
Indeed.
And if something can't be immediately connected to utilitarianism or usefulness, it's jettisoned as irrelevant. And I felt that's what's happened with the trains. Not in other parts of the world. It sure has here. Or trains have been relegated to nostalgia, which is disconnected from necessity. So I talked to colleagues about that. And what is there? We'd have formal discussions. We'd go out for a beer or coffee and thrash around these ideas, or just over the phone conversations. But we'd come up with these ideas, and I began to get a sense that there was a holism that the railroad as a technological phenomenon spoke to. Spoke to the human condition, and went back to that thing with the sky bus or the trolley car motorman, the eye contact with. And I have another story or two which I can share at some point about that same kind of thing. Several colleagues, and Joe Welch, Al Runte, a few others, had introduced me to the art, or reintroduced me to the art of the Hudson River School. Now, do you know about that?
I do not, sir.
Well, the Hudson River School was not a real school, but it was a mid-19th century artistic style, a painting style, founded more or less by Thomas Cole, who was a Brit who came west to the U.S., settled in the Hudson River Valley. And this Hudson River School really was the first grouping or expression of a national landscape style, and it was very popular through the 19th century. The Hudson River artists, many of them, were quite alarmed by burgeoning industrialization. And they saw the railroad at the heart of that, and they did not look favorably on the railroad. They saw this as sort of the machine is in the garden, not a good thing.
Right.
But not all of them felt that way. George Innes painted trains. Jasper Cropsey. Cropsey's one of his most famous paintings, Struck a Viaduct, Pennsylvania, shows that grand multi-arched structure in which the train is hardly visible, and all you see is the smoke, and it disappears momentarily. In many of the Hudson River School paintings, you'd have the artist would have a grouping of people, and they would be looking generally into the scene. It was an artistic device that was used to sort of hint at community, like-mindedness of people looking at the landscape, wanting to see it preserved and honored, and also seeing the divine thumbprint on the land as something to treat with honor and not to despoil. So, in looking at Hudson River School paintings, I saw those themes coming up. And I wanted to echo that kind of care and almost a noble sort of thought about the importance of the land, and that the railway fit into it. It did not have to spoil it or despoil it. So that became a motivator for me. Also, about that time, I began, and through the contacts of these other colleagues, began to realize some things were being written. Aldo Leopold, as an early environmentalist, said something that was very, very notable. And in speaking of the landscape, the flora and fauna, now that was his area of focus. He didn't care about urban planning or transportation or anything else. He was speaking of flora and fauna. Aldo Leopold said a thing or a project is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise.
Wow. Okay.
And I thought, as did my colleagues, that is what the railroad does inherently as a form of transport. Inherently, it preserves the integrity or the connectivity, and then the stability, meaning economic and social stability, as well as the beauty, literal beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. And of course, we know that railroad management did not always treat the landscape with care. And then again, that's not the fault of the mode, that's the fault of the individuals.
Correct.
That's where greed enters the picture, and that's a whole other story. But the thinking of Leopold was something that I could borrow and apply. It almost like a lens through which I could see railroading. And that then became something that is now a part of my writing. And if you read the book, that's the big story.
How does one such as myself get a copy of that book? Where do I find that?
This is published by Indiana University Press last year, 2023. Railroads, Art, and American Life, an artist's memoir. And it can be ordered on Amazon, or it can be ordered through the Indiana University website.
Okay, either one, Amazon or Indiana Press.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's whether I'm giving a lecture, whether I'm writing like that, or doing articles or interactions like this with you and painting, that is a guiding force for me. Does my work reflect that capacity to bring a stability, pardon me, an integrity and beauty All of those are essential. And that's what's missing. That is a greater context is what's missing in this age of utilitarianism. So that, I think, is to go back to your question. I'm sorry I rambled along.
No, you didn't answer at all. It very remarkable. Please finish.
Yeah. So all of those elements are guiding forces for me. And it's quite interesting when well, I'll give you an example. When I talk to somebody about this and they begin to get the picture. Last year I took the Empire Builder back east, and I was in the diner chatting with a fellow, and we were comparing, just talking about our different respective jobs, and I told him what I do. And as the conversation unfolded, he brought up, without my prompting, the fact that, yeah, there's something special about a train. I don't know what that is, but there's something special. So I began to probe, and I asked him about that. So what does that mean? What is special? And thought about it. He said, well, trains are so nostalgic. Well, what do you mean by that? And at that point, he was at a loss for words. He couldn't quite get it. So I pushed a little bit, and then I introduced these Aldo Leopold themes into the conversation about trains helping to bring connectivity. That's the integrity in areas, and stability. There's an economic and social stability, so on, and beauty. And then his eyes lit up. He said, yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. He could only see that through the word nostalgia. And in our culture, nostalgia means, oh, isn't that cute? Or, it's not relevant, but it's, oh, isn't that nice?
That's right.
But in that conversation, it came together. Now, what he did with it is beyond my knowledge. I don't know whether he thought about it anymore. But in that moment, there was aha, there's more here than meets the eye.
May I suggest, by virtue of a very brief story, a more rudimentary example of what you just said? I had the privilege of being close personal friends with a Missouri Pacific Railroad coach porter, a coach attendant. And the Missouri Pacific and the Texas and Pacific Railway operated their coach porters with the train crews. And in other words, the coach attendants, the coach porters didn't run origin to destinations. They got on and off every time a conductor changed, every time a train crew changed, the coach porter changed. And Mr. Walker lived in Texarkana, my hometown. And he said just what you said, but in an entirely different way. He said one day at 3:00 in the morning type stuff, waiting on a late train in Texarkana Union Station. And he said, Hubbard, he said, passenger trains are security blankets. And I said, Mr. Walker, you're going to have to explain that to me. And he said, the doctor, the lawyer, the banker, the preacher, they may not come down here and ride it once a year. They may not come down here and ride it at all. But at 2:00 in the morning, when they wake up in the night and hear that whistle, they want to know the passenger train has stopped in their hometown. And I thought, he's hit the nail on the head. It is a security blanket. And I think you took that much further, but I think the concept is probably the same.
Yeah, and the reality, his comment is here, and we're talking about down here and out. But yes, yeah, that's where the emotion comes in.
Yes,
the train provides that, and so my role as an artist is to say that in ways that elicit response. I know people who have taken the Empire Builder because they've seen my posters.
Really? And
Yeah.
have told you that?
Yeah.
Oh, that must be very gratifying when that occurs. I would think, isn't it? Isn't that a special experience? It would be to me.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of fun. I the folks on the Empire Builder, the now retired Gary Erford was the
Yes.
you know Gary. Okay, it was
Fine gentleman.
yes. He was in charge of the Pioneer and the Empire Builder for years. Anyway, so I did a lot of artwork for Amtrak through Gary and Dan Angstrom and others in that circle of folks. Just wonderful part of my career. And Gary would have me. Well, I was one of the onboard lecturers who would do the Rails to Trails lectures on the Empire Builder from time to time. And Gary would say, take a stack of your posters and sell them on the train. And I do that. And people really responded to that. I was able to share with them in the lounge car or dining car, after everything shut down for the evening. And it was really quite fun. One evening, I was in the diner. This was a couple of years after I had done a lot of this stuff, and the steward introduced me to the folks in the dining car. A lady at the far end put her hand up, and she walked up the aisle, and she said, "I met you 2 or 3 years ago, on this train, such and such a place, and I bought such and such posters." And she rattled off the posters, and she said, "I have all these on my wall," and it was and that invoked some interesting dialogue. That meant something. There was an emotive connection, and the posters continued to speak. It's the same thing. One of the when we get into some of the imagery to show you all later, I think I have a painting in there for the 100th anniversary of Glacier Park, and that was used on the menu for the Empire Builder as well as other applications. And Amtrak had a dickens of a time because the menus kept walking out the door. People take them, and when they found out I was on the train, they'd come and have me sign them. And the crew would do that too. So again, the imagery has power behind it. And see that, and this is why I feel the role of the artist in today's railroad and tomorrow's railroad world has to incorporate these kinds of themes, has to honor that reality, because that is going to shape the decision making.
Could you, I think that is so important. Would you mind repeating that just as an underscore, please? That's
what did I say, Griff? I said
it affects the decision making, and no one says that part out loud, and it is so true.
Yes, so the imagery is a part of decision making. It gets to the emotion, and emotion guides the way we think.
Yes.
Guides what we do. And we've disconnected these things across our culture. And in the railroad world, same sort of thing. Again, everything gets short-circuited or diverted to nostalgia, and there it sets. But actually, there is huge power in opening up people. And I don't know, I gotta tell you this story.
Yes, sir.
Glacier Park, a couple years ago, I was doing some lectures and getting set up for a lecture. And a lady I had met on the train the day before came up to me in the lobby at East Glacier Lodge. And she said, "I can't stay for the program tonight because we have a family event." But she said, "I wanted to come and look at the artwork." So I had all this stuff spread out. And she spotted a painting that I had done of Ed Ellis's private cars that he had put together, painted up in Illinois Central.
Yes.
And they were for a while run as an addition to the city of New Orleans.
Yeah.
So the painting that Ed commissioned showed that train northbound across Lake Pontchartrain out of New Orleans. So we had the three private cars with the round end dome on the tail. So she looked at that and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, this reminds me of something." And it was an instant, passionate response. She said, "When I was a kid, we grew up in Memphis. Didn't have much money, never rode the train. One day," she said, "my dad came home and he said, 'Next week, I've made arrangements to take you down to the train station when it was either Panama Limited or the city of New Orleans goes through.'" This was pre-Amtrak.
Surely.
And she said, I rolled my eyes like, oh, like she's a teenage girl. Like, whoa, I'm going to do that. And he said, no, no, no. He said, "We can't afford to take a ride on this train, but you need to see what this train is because it's not going to be around much longer. And it is important to this area." So she said, we did that. He took her down there and they had somebody walk them through all the cars of that train, showing them everything. So she kind of thought that, I guess, was kind of cool and then just promptly forgot about it. So here is, she's looking at my artwork and she saw that painting and all of this came back. And then this was the fascinating part. Not only did she remember it, and she remembered it with emotion, she said, "Oh, we need more trains like this." And she pointed out to the Amtrak station where the Empire Builder had delivered her that morning. She said, "We need more trains like the Empire Builder. This has to happen. How do we do that?" So over the course of 5 minutes, she went from recognition to history to emotion to present situation to need and asking about solution. And it was bing, 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 bing. So I gave her some answers. Whether she followed through on it again, that's not my responsibility. But the artwork spoke. And that's the key. Not just me or anybody else interpret. The picture spoke. It told the story. It prompted the response. Is that not cool?
That it gives me goosebumps, sir. It's just true. It just rings. It rings as true as the Liberty Bell. It's so accurate. Sir, this is the perfect segue into the wonderful PowerPoint that you have prepared for us so we can see and you can comment on some of your specific works of art and the history behind them. Sir, I've had the privilege of the advance look at this wonderful slide. Could you read the verbiage and tell us what it means to you?
Thank you, Griff. Yes, indeed. This is a good transition into the second part here. The theme of the book and the theme of all my art really can be summed up this way. If we understood just how much trains could bring this integrity, stability, and beauty to the common good, we would not just call them nostalgic, we'd readily call them essential. And art brings this to life. If you recognize those words, integrity, stability, and beauty, again, I'm going back to Aldo Leopold. And that's what that understanding is something that is so missing in our normal dialogues in the railroad and transport world. So again, you see, I'm referring to using the word nostalgic there, going back to what normally happens, but instead we should go the other direction from nostalgia to essentiality. So that's the story, or that's the path, and I, as an artist, then can add that last phrase on there. Art brings this to life, and that last story that I told you about that woman in the Illinois Central painting is a perfect example thereof.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see if we can get this to go to the next slide. And this is an opportunity for another story or two. you see the text I have here. At some point, the light goes on, and we see beyond what these paintings are of to what they are about. I've noted James Popsis here. He's a contemporary English, British landscape photographer. And this is a theme that he espouses in his art. So I'm applying it, as I did apply the Aldo Leopold stuff to rail, I'm applying James Popsis' thought. See, what makes a painting is not what is it about, what is it of, what is the painting of, but what is it about. So here, what is this painting of? Well, it's an Amtrak train at East Glacier Park, and there's a red bus there and some people standing around at the train station, and there's a big lodge in the background, and oh yes, the grandeur of the Rocky Mountains. Yeah, that's what it is of. Those are the components. What's it about? Well, now that's the integrity, stability, and beauty, and that needs to be interpreted. So here's the story. Not long after this painting was produced, I think around 2003, something like that. That was the first version of the cover of my book. Shortly after the painting was done, I was asked to lead a tour from Glacier Park, Montana, down to Paradise, Montana, and catch a train on the charter train on the Montana rail link down to Yellowstone Park. All of this got kicked off with an opening lecture at East Glacier. So here we are at East Glacier, and I was telling the assembled guests much of what I've been sharing with you all today. I think this is before I really understood Aldo Leopold, so I wasn't using those words, but I was using these ideas. And as I was lecturing, there was an older distinguished couple right in the middle of the room, and they kept nodding pretty vigorously, so I could tell, yeah, they were tracking what I was saying. And any speaker likes to get that kind of feedback, even though it was nonverbal. I thought, yeah, I like this. So I was going on with my lecture, and then some dude in the back row stuck his hand up, and he said, "Hey, Craig, do foamers understand this?" And of course, nobody in the room knew the term foamer. I did, and I laughed out loud instantaneously, which made everybody else all the more quizzical. What's going on here? So I explained the term. The foamer idea is somebody who foams at the mouth with a camera around his neck, waiting for the next train to come by. And so after I used some pejoratives and poked fun at foamers a little bit, I responded to his question, and I said, well, actually, real foamers do get that. They put these things together. They do understand it. And yes, that happens. So with a little more banter, I got back on task and finished the lecture. Went out, got on our motor coaches, and drove down to Paradise, Montana. So we got on the train, and as we were leaving the Montana Rail Link facility there, we were going along the river, and it was this grand August day. The sun was glistening off the water. The fields had this wonderful warm glow on them. The distant mountains blue with a brilliant blue sky, azure blue sky, just stellar. And in the dome car where we were standing, there were a couple of tables there. I had a bunch of my posters out. So the conversation went from the posters to the restored dome car to the view outside. Posters, train, landscape. Posters, train, landscape. Posters, train, landscape. And suddenly, the woman who I mentioned earlier, who was there with her husband, she was standing next to me. She kind of lit up. She put her arm on my shoulder, and with this twinkle in her eye and a wry smile said, "Craig, I think I'm becoming a foamer."
Oh, wonderful.
And at that point, everybody dissolved into laughter. but she got it. You see, that's where the light went on. And she went beyond what the paintings are of to what they are about. And it was one of those just incredible moments, you know.
Sir,
I could be there to witness it. Yeah.
I have to ask, is this the picture where the P-42s got painted over into the Siemens Chargers?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
this is what the original painting looked like before they were painted into the Siemens.
Yeah.
Okay.
And another little detail, I have my wife and me in it here.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's a la Alfred Hitchcock-esque.
Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes I paint clients into my paintings.
Wow.
So be careful. You might show up. Anyway, moving right along.
Yes, sir.
This set of images is now going to be grouped into painting the past, painting the present, and painting the possible. And I'm going to change the pace from time to time, but bear with me for the next couple of slides because I want to read something to you from the book. And I know this can get rather protracted if I just start talking forever, which I can do, which you already know I can do. At any rate, I want to read this because it explains the painting and it tells these stories. This is from the opening of chapter 3 in the book, Painting the Past. The anticipation is palpable. It is time-honored ritual of waiting for the train, even if you're not going to ride. The setting is Silver Spring, Maryland, west of Washington, D.C., as Baltimore, Ohio's 1938 edition of the Capital Limited slows for a station stop on its overnight run to Chicago. Families, business people, grandparents, and kids gather to marvel at this striking new blue, gray, and gold streamliner. Some of them were here yesterday, and they'd come again tomorrow. One of them is Scott, the tow-headed kid with the light blue shirt in the middle of the painting. He watched the parade of westward streamliners each day after school. Decades later, he wrote, "The process started at 5:15 with the commuter local, which made all the stops between Washington and Brunswick, Maryland. The departure of this train meant that in just 30 minutes, the most wonderful railroad train in the world would be making its appearance, the Capital Limited." And all Pullman beauty paused briefly to pick up very important people headed to Chicago. More than anything else, I wanted to jump on board that train and live the good life, relax in my own plush bedroom and have an elegant dinner with all the touches, including the finger bowl. The daily show was not over until 4 more trains paused on their westward dash. Scott grew up to be the father of the gentleman who commissioned this art as an 85th birthday present to his dad, who predictably cried when the painting was unwrapped. Scott later wrote that the painting produced memorable recollections of times and experiences in his early years that sent him on a wonderful lifelong journey with railroads and their people. Taken for granted for decades, passenger trains like the Capital Limited stirred the imagination of trackside viewers who glanced up long enough to connect with these striking conveyances and, like Scott, envy all of those on board. So essential were these trains to a sense of place that earlier in the 20th century, a noted judge in Vaden, Mississippi, along the Illinois Central's main line, recessed his court for 5 minutes every session for 12 years, so everyone had time to watch the Panama Limited roar through town. Beauty, mobility, and a sense of place made these experiences of community so regular and so unassumingly normal.
You know, Mr. Thorpe, thank you for reading that. I don't know how it affected anybody else, but it gave me a sense of stability in very uncertain times. Thank you. I had a moment of everything's okay.
Yeah, thank you. So moving from the Baltimore and Ohio to another Eastern line, this is a poster that I did for the Altoona Railroaders Memorial Museum in Altoona, PA. And it was showing the restored 1361 last K4 that is now being rebuilt again in Altoona. In the background is the 12th Street Bridge, a pedestrian bridge over which people would go to and from work. In its heyday, the mighty Pensy had 17,000 people working in Altoona alone. And with every shift change, people would come and go across 12th Street Bridge. The painting, you asked about titles earlier, this one's called Smoke, Cinders, and Pride. And it includes, you look down there to the lower left of the engine, we see two railroad workers and a kid.
Yes.
He painted him rather like the boy in the previous painting, didn't I?
You did.
Blonde head and khaki pants. Well, how about that? That kid gets around. But anyway, this was used to establish the Railroaders Memorial Museum to show its grandeur, yet the pride that its people had, and it does a good job of setting that. By contrast, now we go from the mighty Pensy to short lines. On the right, we have the East Broad Top, also a Pennsylvania Railroad. In this case, the EBT, as most of your viewers know, is being rebuilt in grand fashion. This shows the Baldwin locomotive number 18 on Cole's Curve, a horseshoe curve there on the EBT, which will be reopened probably in the next couple of years.
Wow. You're informing me something I did not know. Okay.
Yeah, and in the background, you'll see the string of hopper cars and then a combine car. EBT generally ran a combine, considering that as a mixed train, so you can have passenger and freight. And then beyond that, to the almost off the picture to the right is the covered tank house at Coles, and that's the last tank house that remains on East Broad Top. So that will be rebuilt.
Tell our viewers what a tank house is.
It's a covered tank. There's a tank in there for the water for the tender of the locomotive, and there'd be a big spout, and generally the fireman would crawl up on the back of the tender and pull the spout down, open the lid on the tank, and put the spout in and run the water in there, fill up. And they do that, going up the mountain a couple of times.
As a brief aside, down south, ladies and gentlemen, it's the same thing we call down south water towers, but up north they had tank houses because they had to build houses around the water tank to protect them from the severe winter weather.
That's absolutely right.
So that the water would not freeze.
Mm-hmm. Well said. So what I'm doing with this painting, and then I'll talk about the left one in a moment, I'm showing short line railroads. What we have here with East Broad Top is only 33 miles long compared to the Pensy. But the experience is the same. Integrity, stability, and beauty. East Broad Top brought an integrity, a connectivity amongst those mountain towns in the Appalachians there in Pennsylvania, central PA. It brought a certain economic stability and a social stability. And it enabled people to understand or experience the beauty of the land, and in its own way to the gritty beauty of the railroad. And with the East Broad Top Foundation now, that is coming back again. That's going to happen again. So here's a historic railroad that did integrity, stability, and beauty as part of its raison d'etre. But now it's happening again as a tourist line. Really grand. Off to the left,
And it
we
before, and I do want to talk about the left photograph because it's so educational, or it was for me when you told me about it. But I want to point out, and I hope I'm not being artistically inclined. I hope I'm using the wrong terms, but this is the East Broad Top is kind of like a charcoal or pen and ink drawing, meaning question mark, you work in all mediums?
I don't do charcoal, but I do pencil, and this is a pencil rendering. Yeah, it's done with a blocked it out with a HB lead, pretty stiff, hard lead,
Okay.
and put light line work down, and then I would work over that with a B or a 4B. And the 4B gives you the dark darks, and makes that snap.
That's just that's to me that's just astounding. I think that just takes such talent to be able to do that.
Thank you. Well, I love doing black and white pencil drawings. Always have. And when I was a kid, I did more ink work. The older I got, the more I liked pencil. So, with your permission, Griff, I'll shift over to the left-hand painting. This is a Wahoo.
Yes, I want you to tell me all of when we previewed this together before we started the podcast. I'm going to introduce it this way. I knew there were passenger trains in the Hawaiian Islands. Excuse me. I knew there were trains in the Hawaiian Islands. I thought they were strictly freight movers for the pineapple industry. But here's a passenger train. Tell us about it, please.
Yeah. When I was younger, when you talk about Hawaii and transportation, all I think of is, surfboards. Hang 10, dude. And well, the Oahu Railroad was one of a number of railroads on the islands. And as you're right, they were built for the pineapple trade and also sugarcane.
Okay.
So they would use passenger trains to connect certain spots along the line, but in most cases, to connect those different plantations with the point where they would process the sugarcane. This particular rail line was used extensively during World War II. And after that, patronage dropped. Through World War II, the railroad around Pearl Harbor and Honolulu was just, I guess they were running trains on streetcar headway or something. It was very, very busy. But with the end of hostilities, the train was no longer needed, and roads were pushed through into the backcountry. I believe the Oahu, don't quote me on this one, I think it was about 70 miles long. So it was pretty hefty, about twice as long as East Broad Top.
And didn't you tell me this particular passenger train you painted, if I have it correctly, that it connected Pearl Harbor with Honolulu?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a distance of about 70 miles?
No, that's much closer. But this went to the north. This is north, if I understand my geography right, this is north of Honolulu and north of Pearl Harbor. And this ran up the west side of Oahu and then looped around to the top, where the big waves are that surfers really like to.
Is it a highway today, or a rails to trails, or is it just abandoned, or do we know?
I do not know. I've been up to the north end of the island, but through the middle part of the island. So I don't know. There is a short diesel-powered excursion train that runs on part of that old right-of-way, closer down to Honolulu and Pearl Harbor.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll move on here. So we went from the Grand Pensy, connecting the Midwest to the East Coast, to the little short lines. And now this is sort of halfway between. This is the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western. And with the Phoebe Snow. And I want to take a moment and read you the text for this one, because it sets a tone for what I'm calling regional railroads. And then once again, the integrity, stability, and beauty of trains fits into that. And artwork enables us to show it. This was a private commission by Charles Mott, a friend of mine who now lives in Arizona. And it was an early piece in the development of my artwork. So here is the text. It's time to go with Phoebe Snow, where banks of rhododendron blow, in pink and white on every height, along the road of anthracite. At the turn of the 20th century, a striking beauty appeared in the railway advertising world. Miss Phoebe Snow appeared in drawings and in countless jingles as she touted the clean-burning anthracite coal of the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western, from Hoboken, New Jersey, to Buffalo, New York. Not just for business travelers, the railway catered to vacationers anxious to get out of the Northeast cities. Accordingly, the jingles highlighted the food, the services, the scenery awaiting the passenger. When the line introduced a striking maroon yellow and gray streamliner after World War II, there was no doubt that its name would be Phoebe Snow. The painting shows two trains, including Phoebe on the right, crossing the Pollenskill Viaduct at Haynesburg, New Jersey. Lasting until 1966, Phoebe offered exceptional vistas and points of entry to northeastern vacation lands on its daylight dash across the southern tier. While these verses have long since ceased in the railroad's advertising, they remained part of Lackawanna folklore. As such, they spoke, and perhaps still speak to some, of a train's part in the cultural stability of its region. We take for granted the momentary meeting of two trains, as in this painting. However, they symbolize the comings and goings in Miss Phoebe's landscape. They raise questions, they offer answers. Earlier in this book, and earlier in our discussion group, I wrote that Griff Teller and his art were meaningful to me. Near the end of his life, Griff told me that at one point in his career, he worked with the individual who wrote all these jingles. Are they just corny doggerel locked in history? Perhaps. But in their rereading, if we listen, we will hear what the painting suggests and what surpasses any racy ad for a 5G network. A birch canoe and Phoebe too, already there to welcome you. The season's right, the distance slight, upon the road of anthracite. And while the road of anthracite and Phoebe Snow are long gone, the invitation to reflect on their regional role is not.
Beautiful. And so true.
Yeah, so I'm wanting verbiage to complement paintings by causing the reader and the viewer to see it differently and to see it and experience it in a deeper way. So moving right along, we have an interurban train. This on the Chicago, Roar, and Elgin. This also a private commission from Bob Elkire, a friend of mine in the Chicago area. And by the way, that's Bob there, this little kid with the blue shirt. This dude has jeans appropriately with the cuffs rolled up. His family lived in Wheaton, Illinois. This is College Avenue Station on the Chicago, Roar, and Elgin. Bob's dad worked in downtown Chicago, and his mom and Bob would take the Roar and Elgin in to do shopping and such. So when Bob asked me to commit to produce the composition, I decided I wanted something that kind of showed it was kind of a little bit racy. So we see the train canted as it's coming around this super elevated curve. That adds to a little bit of drama to it. And also, if you take a look at the horizon line, you see the horizon line, the eye level, in effect, is that of a 7-year-old. So we are looking at this painting as a 7-year-old would, not as an adult would, with the horizon line up here.
Wow.
And so I'm inviting us, even to people who don't know that, to just look at, to see it as a kid would, and to catch the drama of that. You know, America had almost 16,000 miles of electric interurban,
Yes.
and C&E was certainly one of the best, one of the last. The order for these 460 series cars was about I think about the last order of true interurban cars in the United States transport history.
It's just remarkable. I love the perspective, and might I say, we discussed previously, Mr. Thorpe, that through World War II, the state of Texas had its own 100-mile-per-hour interurban operation called the Texas Electric Railway.
Yeah.
And of course, progress has done away with all of that. And of course, I use progress in quotes.
Yes.
We
Please do.
traded that for gridlock on I-35 and I-45.
Yeah. Some trade, eh?
Some trade, yes, sir.
Well, keeping the electrification theme going here, this is Great Northern Maine over the Washington Cascades. This is a train headed toward us with a freight train headed toward us under the power of a W-class electric, one of the huge two of these that were built by General Electric for the Great Northern. This setting would have been about 1953, 1954. Electrification came down in 56. The highway bridge, US Highway 2, is still there today. The station and the other outbuildings are long gone. And this was once again a private commission, and it's kind of interesting that people don't even remember that the Great Northern had this electrification,
right,
from Skycomish on the west side to Wenatchee on the east side of the Cascade Range, and when this tunnel was opened in 1929, it was a big deal. So big, in fact, that NBC Radio linked together, patched together the first, or essentially the first, national broadcast that went from coast to coast. There were people interviewed. The president, Hoover, was interviewed in Washington, D.C., and he invited people to see the importance of this to national security and also general mobility. But there were people in Philadelphia and I think New York, San Francisco, and right here at Bern, Washington. So all of those were linked together by radio. It was one of the first times anything like that was accomplished. And it was in celebration of the role of the railroad.
Wow.
So we go from Washington State a bit north to the White Pass in Yukon. This just out of Skagway, Alaska. You can see down here the Lynn Canal. This is the Sawtooth Range of mountains. Go figure, huh? Sawtooth. And I was telling Griff the other day that earlier in the White Pass existence, they had a viewing platform right here on this curve of one of the straight sections. So trains going up and down the mountains could stop, passengers could get out, and they could view this grand vista. It was and still is known as Inspiration Point. It's one of my favorite paintings. I like the distinctive diesels, the shovel nose GE diesels. There's a big place. I think they still have some, but.
What year does this represent, Mr. Thorpe?
5 years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so this line is very much still in operation.
Oh my, yes.
Okay, I know very little about it. Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, the White Pass was built essentially in 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. 110 miles from Skagway, Alaska, at sea level, right there, Skagway, to Whitehorse, Yukon Territory.
And do they still have steam?
I am.
Okay.
Yep. And I don't know how often steam is used, but they've ordered new diesels recently. Also, some of your viewers will know that a couple, maybe I think it was three of the 101 class Alcos built by Montreal Locomotive Works were shipped to the Durango Silverton. So that's where they run now.
Okay.
Anyways, I really like the texture on this and the backlighting almost on the mountains. You get the intensity of the purples and blues. It's one of my favorite pieces.
Was this commissioned by the White Pass and Yukon Railroad?
Yes, it was. And I did work for them for about 14 years.
Okay.
So I think it comprises about 50 paintings and drawings. Did a lot of ink work for them, some pencil drawings, some architectural renderings, in fact, and that.
All right.
So that kind of gives you an overview of some of those historic themes: the painting of the past, the steam locomotives, electrification, early diesels, and so on. So we'll shift to painting the present, what we have and often overlook. For most people, they get stopped at a railway crossing and grouse about the fact they have to wait for the train to go by.
Right.
That's all they look at. They don't necessarily see the role of the railroad, or you get a nasty situation like the tanker train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, the other year.
Yes.
Those negative events cast a pall in many levels, including over the viability and the necessity of the railroad. Well, so let's shift to painting the present, shall we? And again, what we have here are some Amtrak pieces, and this is one I referred to a little bit earlier with the 100th anniversary piece for Glacier National Park. Amtrak commissioned this. Now, what we have here, the focal point of the painting, you might think is the train. No, it's this Mount St. Nicholas in the background. Now, I have a very dog-eared artistic license. Technically, you wouldn't see Mount St. Nicholas from this perspective.
Okay.
But I moved it, I can do these things.
I love it.
This is along the middle fork of the Flathead. This is number 8, Amtrak 8, Empire Builder eastbound. And off to the right here, we have a ranger on a mule. Parenthetically, the mule's name is Daisy, and she lives here in Bellevue. I didn't ever try to ride Daisy. At any rate, the title of the painting is Guardians of the Legacy. Once again, informed by thoughts from Al Runte. The idea being that the National Park Service is a guardian of the legacy that is, is Glacier, but also all the other national parks. There is a preservationist role. They are, as a division of government, they are charged with that protection, that oversight, that guardianship, if you will. So what I'm saying with this painting is that it isn't just the Park Service that's the guardian. It is the train that is the guardian.
Sure.
The train permits responsible visitation.
Sure.
It permits an experience of that integrity, stability, and beauty. So Amtrak picked that up and used this in a whole variety of products, which they sold and gave away. And it was just one of the best representations of the application of art to this role of interpreting and celebrating rail. There's these 18 by 24 inch posters, cover of Runte's book, Trains of Discovery, mugs, menus, refrigerator magnets, note cards, and keychains. And it showed up online too in who knows what ways. So these are examples of the use of art that people appreciate. and it tells a story. And whenever somebody looks at one of those magnets or drinks coffee out of that mug, that painting is always telling its story.
I must ask the question on that painting, sir. Did you also have in mind the train itself is certainly I love what you said because it provides responsible egress and ingress into the park. But is it also meant to say that regardless of how one feels about Amtrak, Amtrak indeed is the only show in town. It is the only protector of the legacy of the American passenger train.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you extrapolate that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes from the local or the smaller application to the larger.
Yes, sir.
Exactly what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, this also is reprising some of the earlier railway advertising of railroads that used the dome cars, whether that be Santa Fe or Northern Pacific or Union Pacific, Great Northern, even B&O.
Great
But
reference.
that's
Yes.
what we see here with the Superliner Lounge.
Yes, sir.
So I have done so many pieces for Amtrak for the Empire Builder route, and really do love that. So here, this one was for the 75th anniversary of the train in 2004. Kind of an interesting tale with this one. My son, the one who was a part of that Portland Union Station event years before, went with me on this. We rode the Builder eastbound to Chicago, and then got on board the celebrative train that honored the actual 75th anniversary coming west. And it was fun. We got on at Chicago Union Station, and somebody had put a tag on my bedroom door, Empire Builder Art Department.
Ha ha ha! How wonderful! I bet
Yeah,
you. I bet you love that though.
Yeah, I really appreciated that.
Yes.
It's interesting. David Gunn was president of the company at that point, and he had arranged the train so that we had a transition, the transition sleeper at the rear instead of the front end, and then behind that was one of the old Great Northern full-length dome cars, and behind that was the 10,001 Beech Grove business car.
Right.
And as we moved across the country, Mr. Gunn would invite local political and business people aboard to share in the joy of this. So it was a really quite a rolling event. When we got to Glacier, we were a few minutes behind schedule, and sometimes Gunn would get off the train and make an extemporaneous speech of appreciation to the people of these local towns. So I guess we didn't think that there'd be very many people there at Glacier. We were running late. It was getting a little bit on the dark side. Well, we were quite wrong. We rolled to a stop at East Glacier Station, as I showed you in the book cover and that other painting. We rolled to a stop, and there in front of us was a lineup of probably a dozen or 15 of the red buses, which are all, of course, a part of the legacy of North National Park. There are 35 or 36 of them built. Most of them are there. And that day there was this lineup. I think it was 12 or 15, with the drivers all standing out, sort of saluting and commemorating this great event. That the Empire Builder was now 75 years old, and they were participating in that. So Mr. Gunn dashed off the train and gave his appropriate words of appreciation and thanks and good wishes. And then we moved on west. But it was a very meaningful moment to see the connection. That's what Louis Hill had in mind way back when. And when that park was dedicated in 1910, there was this connection. And that's a connection between the railroad and the landscape and the railroad and the national parks. So here's a question for you. What national parks are served by rail? Do you know, Griff?
Well, the Grand Canyon National Park.
Yep.
Um, in my day, we don't do it anymore, but in my day, the Texas Eagles served Hot Springs National Park by a throughway bus connection between Arkadelphia, Arkansas, and downtown Hot Springs. That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I would say and Glacier National Park, of course. Beyond those three, I'm probably not qualified. I don't know.
Denali in Alaska.
Denali, okay.
That's the Alaska Railroad.
Okay.
So we have the Alaska Railroad at Denali, Amtrak here at Glacier, and the Grand Canyon Railway in Arizona. Those are the three.
Those are the three carriers. I see. All right.
And the three carriers and the three parks.
Okay. Okay. So I didn't realize it at the time. So during the period in the early part of this century when the Texas Eagles served Hot Springs National Park, by virtue of its 20-minute throughway bus connection out of Arkadelphia, we were in high cotton. That wasn't that there weren't a whole lot of people doing that. There was only a small number. That would have been 4 instead of 3, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I didn't realize that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a shame that Amtrak dropped their connection with the Grand Canyon Railway at Williams, because they did that for a number of years. They stopped the Southwest Chief there, and you could transfer to the Grand Canyon Railway. They had a coach connection between the Amtrak yard at Williams.
This is just editorial comment on my part, and I certainly want to stay at the 50,000-foot level. But in my 53-year railroad career, I've seen this happen 3 or 4 times where possibly Amtrak gets separated on a growing disparity with the grassroots level. And what happens is, and I saw this 3 or 4 times in my career, what happens is that rubber band gets stretched so tight that it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this wholesale slaughter of everything that has to be rebuilt.
That's right.
And just as editorial comment, just from my observation post, I have never seen the rubber band stretched as tightly as it is right now in disparity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why we need all of these modes of communication or styles of communication to tell the story and
Amen.
to push beyond the expected.
Amen. Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's move ahead here from Two Medicine Trestle. This was another Amtrak commission, no train in sight, but it is the centennial poster for Washington, D.C. Union Station, produced for that big event in 2008. The original painting hangs in the Amtrak offices. It's about almost 5 feet long. It's a pretty big painting.
Wow. Okay. How long did that take to paint?
A couple months.
Okay.
Probably 3 months.
Okay. And it's 5 feet long.
Just about.
And I'm going to guess at the bottom, those are all the logos of the railroads that served Union Station.
Spot on.
Okay.
Yep, all of them, including today, Amtrak, MARC, Virginia Railway Express, Washington Metro.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
So, as I mentioned to you, Griff, when we did a run through of this stuff, you look over here, you can see several military people just sort of tipping my hat or saluting my cap, however you want to say, to the role of the military in Washington and in Washington, D.C. Union Station. How many millions of military people have passed through these arches? It's very important. Another little artistic trick. If you look closely down here, you see here a couple of city buses and taxis and cars, and there's another sightseeing tour bus. And what is that ahead of that? It's a PCC car. How did that get there, I wonder?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, well, Cliff Black and I kind of hatched that little trick for anybody who might be interested. So sort of maybe predating what's going to happen with rail resurgence in DC and elsewhere. So moving along from this, I do want to say one quote. The post office building back here was designed by Daniel Burnham, who was the architect for Washington Union Station. You know Burnham's famous line, "Make no small plans. They have no magic to stir the blood of men." And
I love it.
that is so true. You stand there under these grand arches and you are lifted up. There is a hopefulness that you get when you see this and experience this kind of architecture as gateway to this kind of train we're talking about. There is an integrity there.
I want to remember that. Make no small plans because it does not stir the.
They don't have the magic to stir the blood of men.
I love that.
They have no magic, I think it is. Yeah. So it's in a way touching this patriotic theme again. Many of you and your viewers will know that the railroads often commissioned patriotically themed art. And I've had a chance to do these two pieces to kind of reprise that application. Painting on the right is an Amtrak piece commissioned by Joe McHugh of Amtrak when he was VP. And it shows a P-42 engine number 42 honoring the different service people, the different military services. And as the title says here, the subtitle, commemorating those who have served and those serving our nation. When Joe asked me to do this painting, we discussed different options. I did sketches with different settings. And he said, all of this stuff works. But he said, why don't we try something else? He said, let's just create a setting. So this scene does not exist anywhere. It started in my mind and ended up on this paper. And it is a typical thing. Joe said, I want you to think small town. I want you to think mid-America, and I want you to think Norman Rockwell. And so here they are. In mid-America, well, there's a barn and there's a cornfield, poplar trees. Oh yeah, grain elevators. Yeah, small town station.
A 1960s truck, pickup truck?
Oh yeah, well, it has an MIA sticker on it too.
Okay. Joe McHugh is such a fine man and a dear friend of mine, and you probably already know this, but his brainchild was also the circular signs that are up all over this nation that proudly says this is an Amtrak served community.
Well, Joe is the inspiration of many a good idea.
Yes, sir.
And I do count him as a friend.
Yes, sir.
So we put this together, the two of us planned this out. So we have these different groupings of soldiers, families hugging one another, getting on and off the Amfleet train back there. Got to have a dog. So here's a dog.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
And an older gentleman, a vet, that could be me with the white hair now, and a kid with a flag. So this tells that story artistically of connections again. The painting to the left was commissioned by the BNSF to celebrate the Holiday Express, the train that they run. I guess they have several of them that they run around in different places around the country during Christmas holiday season. And so we have a soldier here holding a kiddo, and down here with this pack of people, including Santa Claus, a train with a wreath on the nose. This is especially meaningful to me because the soldier is my son Tim, who posed for this after he returned from his first tour duty in Iraq as a National Guardsman. So I'm
Please.
sorry, he was Army Reserves at this time, and then he went back in as a National Guardsman. Tim was just coming back from the Army Reserve gig in Iraq.
Please thank him for our freedom, sir.
You bet, shall do.
And you also.
Thank you. So
Sir,
that was,
I have to ask a question about that painting, just from my railroad perspective. I know about the BNS Holiday Express trains, BNSF, but very little about them. Did they? I noticed the equipment beyond maybe a head-in power car. Did they lease Superliner equipment from Amtrak to operate them? Because I noticed that's double-decker equipment.
no, it's equipment that they own, and I don't know where they keep it. I'm guessing somewhere in the Chicago area, but I don't know.
I did not know that.
All that's double deck BNSF equipment.
Got it. Must be probably from the old commuter fleet, maybe.
I'm not, no doubt. Yeah, good question.
Okay.
So, speaking of passenger equipment, this Via Rail Canada is Canadian
Beautiful.
in Columbia, and this was commissioned by a tour company in the upper Midwest, used in various ways. But it's one of my favorite paintings. I just love the flute-sided dome cars and such. So it brings back some meaningful trips that were a part of my story.
And am I misremembering? Didn't you tell me that a tour operator commissioned this?
Yes. Yeah, they did.
Okay.
I'll go back to it. There we are. Oh,
It's
too many.
just beautiful.
Yeah, I like you get the softness, the muffled nature of the train, but the snow does that, and it just is just a great piece. Of course, I wouldn't want to be hanging out the Dutch door very long with that.
No.
No.
I have to ask, is it double track and that's the artist's rendition of
Yeah.
snow accumulation on? You know what? That looks so real. Because that's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, thank you, Griff. Thank you. Now we'll move ahead. This is a piece that I did for Union Tank Car Company. Union Tank Car commissioned, I think it was 13 or 14 paintings of showing settings all around the country where their tank car fleet served local businesses. So this they chose for Maryland and West Virginia. This is Harper's Ferry. And we have a MARC commuter train headed outbound from Washington, D.C., and this lineup of UTLX tank cars headed in. We can go back and talk about this in a minute, about this specific painting, but I mentioned that sometimes paintings were commissioned in groups. And earlier, I showed you that Hawaii painting, the one of the narrow gauge steam locomotive on Oahu.
Yes, sir.
That was one of 50 paintings in a series, which was the largest commission I'd ever had. Commissioned by the Unicover Corporation, they do stamp collecting and numismatic products. So they were working with Dan Cupper. Many of your listeners will know Dan, a writer for Trains Magazine and other publications, Railway and Locomotive Historical Society and such. Dan was a longstanding friend of mine, and they were working with Dan, and Dan brought me on board to do these illustrations. Dan wrote the accompanying text, and I did the paintings. And there were 50 in the series.
Wow.
One historic railroad event for each state of the Union. And I had to do that in slightly over a year. Now, do the math. I had to paint mighty fast.
You certainly did.
I don't want to go back to that.
No, I wouldn't.
That
I
was a
wouldn't want
great
to be on
commission. I loved working with those people. But
You know, I have to ask you the public question that I've already asked you privately. And ladies and gentlemen, what I said when we were viewing or when I was viewing this painting for the very first time, and I said, it's remarkable, Mr. Thorpe, how many shades of black you have in your repertoire. And he said, actually, I have no black paint at all. So tell us how you get, how do you do that?
yes, it's my secret recipe. Uh, no, it's a combination. Those blacks are a combination of burnt umber, which is a brown, and ultramarine blue, and white, and a little bit of cerulean blue as well, because the cerulean blue, that's the sky blue. You see the cerulean colors reflected here in the water and here at the top of the mark train. So we see some of that in the tops of the tank cars reflecting the sky. So that's a combination of cerulean blue and white mixed into this other combination of dark blue, ultramarine, and brown. Yeah, so that's nobody's secret, but you could drop that at the next cocktail party. It won't get you anything, but maybe an interesting comment back.
I have to tell you this very brief aside about Harper's Ferry. In my time in operations, I actually pulled a ticket from a gentleman from the Southeast with probably from Charleston, South Carolina, or if he wasn't, he certainly had that dialect. And he said, I want you to look at how my travel agent wrote this ticket. And I was literally pulling the ticket at the time he was telling me this. And it said, he was showing me as the humor it was, he said, notice how it's spelled. And it was from Harper's Ferry to Chicago to Texas. But what it said was HOPPUSFAIRY. And he said, I went to that travel agent. I told him, I said, I wanted a ticket from Harper's Ferry. That's exactly what travel agent did.
That's what he got.
Got a ticket from Harper's Ferry. That is a true story. But it worked. Amtrak accepted it. We accepted, sir. Got him right where he wanted to go.
Oh boy, that's great fun.
Yes, sir.
Oh, Dan Cupper and I went to Harper's Ferry together to research the painting that I did for the 1995 Amtrak calendar, which was to take the spot that I used as a station point was down here along the riverfront. We were looking back at the mountain behind me and the tunnel with the Capital Limited coming through it. And Dan and I were there. It was a hot summer day, muddy and mucky. And I can't tell you how many times I almost fell into the Potomac River, scampering along, trying to get a spot where I could look through the trees and take pictures. That was memorable. Anyway, we'll just move right along. But this is typical of that. And then, as I said, these paintings have come in groups, and so these are just representatives of some of those. Here's an interesting piece that the Oregon Department of Transportation commissioned to celebrate or to commemorate, really, the Lewis and Clark bicentennial. We weren't celebrating that because as the West was opened, we all know there was great damage done to not just the land, not just the wildlife, but to the peoples of the West. So celebrating was not the right term. Commemorate, yep, that we could go with. So in conjunction with Amtrak, the Oregon DOT ran these former BC Rail bud cars from Portland out to Astoria, Oregon. And the client commissioned several paintings for me. This was the first of the set. And it shows 3 of the bud cars in a composite setting. They came to me and said, we want you to capture the spirit of this railroad line. You don't have to paint any one particular spot. So I spent a day with the rain blowing horizontally, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Making notes and taking pictures, trying to get get these spots. So all these buildings and these boats, this is the Columbia River in the background. All of this exists. This is Mount Hood. All of that is at some point along that route. So I just put it together into this kind of a composition. And what we have in the sky, you see, this is the what's known as an allegorical sky. Griff Teller used this technique quite a bit. You sort of tell a secondary story or a supportive story. So what, at first glance, this looks just like clouds. At a closer look, you see there's Thomas Jefferson, Sacagawea, and Clark and Lewis. And, or maybe which one is Lewis and Clark, I forget. At any rate, the point that I made in the artist's statement was that those individuals made possible the opening of the American West. And their efforts were followed by however many years before the railroad came, 1869 was the golden spike, and then in the 70s it all developed. But they laid the foundation for the opening. Again, the opening of the West was not without shame and without disaster. But my point is that we need visionaries like they were visionaries. We need visionaries for how our land, our landscapes, urbanscapes, all of that can benefit from the rail.
Amen.
And not be the subject of, again, misuse or abuse. But that came out in the artist's statement that I published with the painting.
Magnificent.
And here we have, I think this is about the last one in the second series. This is a freight train. This was one of the General Electric paintings that I commissioned, or that I mentioned earlier. As I was telling you, Griff, the other day, it was quite fun and exciting, downright exciting to be here at Horseshoe Curve and have my host unlock the gate and walk me across the 4-track main or 3-track main line now, where Griff Teller walked across the 4-track main line no few times during his career. So it was quite fun to be there and then to create this painting. And then, of course, Altoona is down there in the
So that's one of the General Electric commissions that they personally gave to the Norfolk Southern as a
That is
gift.
correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
What a wonderful Griff Teller story. And there, can you see today where the 4th main line was?
Oh, yeah.
Across.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So let's move on here. Now we look at painting the possible, what we need for rail transport and could have if we were so willing to make the investment and capture the vision. So the painting in front of us was the second piece in my career. The first one, if you remember, was the Amtrak calendar. This for the X2000, commissioned by ABB, opened the second, was the second painting. This is at Gap, Pennsylvania. It's at a tight turn on the Harrisburg line, former Pennsy, now Amtrak, Keystone Corridor. Gap is a Pennsylvania Dutch town, very staid in its conservatism, in its architecture and style. And I chose this setting for ABB because I wanted to use these contrasting yet very complementary images. I wanted to say that a contemporary electrified train can fit indeed into and complement the landscape of a traditional Pennsylvania town, or any town as far as that matter. They don't have to be competitors. They can be complementary types. So that was beginning in my career at the very beginning. It was long before I had bumped into Aldo Leopold and the Hudson River School of Art and all those other influential and idea shaping events. This was typical of that. And I just rode by there not too long ago, and those buildings are there. That's the way we did it.
And this was commissioned by ABB?
Yes, yes.
And what happened to those originals? They took possession of them?
Well, they were incorporated or bought out by I don't know I forget now the name of the company that took them over. The painting uh, was on display in the Pittsburgh office for years. I don't know where it is now. But here's a story about this. When the painting started, I approached it with a pencil sketch, sent it off to the client. They loved it. They said, yes, let's go for it. Amtrak got in on it, said, yep, we'll do this. So I started in, then I refined the pencil drawing, and then I transferred that to the canvas and started the work on the painting. I got a call from Amtrak one day in DC, and the woman said, would we have a need? Would it be possible for you to put some color on the black and white sketch? Send it to us so we could put it in the bistro car on the X2000 as it tours up and down the corridor to show people what the painting is going to look like when you complete it. I said, yes, I could do that very easily. It didn't take very long. I think within a day I had color on it, packaged up and sent overnight to Amtrak, and they acknowledged the receipt of it. I kept working on the oil painting at that point. Well, 2 weeks later, I got a phone call, a panicked, desperate phone call from Amtrak. And the person at the other end of the line said, we got a problem. Somebody stole the print or the colored painting that you sent.
Wow.
They stole it from the train. Is there any possibility that you might have taken a color copy that we could replace it with? And I said, yes, I have color copies. So, sort of in a Groundhog Day, I've been here before. I mounted that, sent it off. 2 weeks later, another panicked phone call. Craig, somebody stole the copy. My touched up, the original colored version was stolen, then the colored copy was stolen. Well, by that time, it wasn't worth sending another one because the painting was finished, and within 2 weeks, they would have the final prints, and they did. But here's a reflection on that. As I've told that story, I've mused with people that these two squirrely, morally challenged rail fans probably swiped those two paintings. And,
Well, I like this better. I like this. Thank you for telling this wonderful.
well,
But just like Gainsborough's Blue Boy, which of course was recovered, but just like Gainsborough's Blue Boy, there is an original J. Craig Thorpe out there in hands that are dirty.
that's right. Well, as I've mused on this event with people, their comments back to me put a different spin on it. They said, no, it might have just been ethically challenged rail fans. But my friends have suggested an alternate, and they said, no, maybe the fact that those pictures were stolen by two different people, we suppose, meant that there's something deeper. People are responding to image and to hope in a way that they didn't even know they were doing. These are hopeful paintings. This is a hopeless age. People respond to hope and maybe don't even know it. And that's what my colleague said. Now, take that higher view that somebody was responding to that. They might thought that they were just grabbing a cool painting to have that nobody else could have. Maybe that's the case. But why? Because they saw something in it worth having. And that something, it shows that this painting points to hope. So I'll take my friend's version of it and we'll go with that.
I'm carrying it a step further. Thank you for saying that. I know who I'm voting for in the U.S. presidential election in November. I'm writing your name in. So, sir, if you see yourself show up out of Texas, you'll know who did it.
Okay, enough already. Let's change the subject and change the slide. Uh, so here we have two more oil paintings that reflect this painting the possible, painting what could be. Off to the left, we have a large, this was 24 by 36 painting of two of the Talgo trains, the Series 6 Talgos, operating near Mount St. Helens here in the background. This is near Chehalis, Washington. Some of you may know that these trains were designed by Cesar Vergara, noted Mexican-born, a Basque stock, wonderful industrial designer. He's done work worldwide. These are Caesar's best products. One little interesting story. Caesar is quite a quick wit. Commented, he said, just after these trains were released, people were asking about these wings of on these power cars that kind of swoop up here to visually tie the high F-59 locomotives, visually tie them down to the lower rail cars. And some quirky news person said to Caesar, "Do those wings offer any lift?" As if you'd want something to lift the train.
Right.
And Caesar, being the quick wit, immediately responded, "Well, of course they offer a lift. They lift the spirits of everybody who sees them."
Love it.
And that's Caesar, and that's his work. I had the pleasure within the last year or so of working with a group of gentlemen who saved the very last one of the Series 6 cars, and it was the Bistro car, one of the Bistro cars, and that's now at the Pacific Northwest Rail Museum here. The painting on the right is also commissioned by the same person, Chuck Mott, who was then the president of Washington Association of Rail Passengers, and this in conjunction with Gil Carmichael. Many of you may remember Gil.
What a wonderful, I think we discussed, we need him back. I wish he were still with us.
Well, that's right. And this painting was really the result of work with Gil. He had me design a concept of a railway train, a Talgo train, that carried freight cars or freight containers that would also be applicable for shipping on trucks like these post office trucks or airplanes like this one in the background. So this is true freight intermodalism. We also have passenger intermodalism over here with electrified trains, the circulator at the airport, and then the light rail trains, buses, and so on. This never got built, although SeaTac Airport did expand. We do now have light rail to the airport, heavy rail a few miles down the road. It's not going to operate into the airport complex. But nonetheless, this painting has been used nationally by NARP and a lot of other folks to suggest how true intermodalism can work. In this case, it really picks up on the freight intermodal. So kudos to Carmichael.
You have not left, I'm asking, of course, you've not left off the concept of returning the U.S. mails to the rail, I guess, with the postal trucks in the foreground?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. All that was, everything in there is quite intentional.
Love it.
Another of these forward-looking trains, earlier I said I've had a chance to paint about 5 of these different trains over the course of my career, these visiting trains. This is one of the turboliners that were imported from France and used along the Hudson River. This is West Point in the background, Bear Mountain Bridge down there. The little village of Garrison is hidden behind these trees, and this is one of the turboliners. Obviously, that whole project ended in the disaster with ill will between Amtrak and NYDOT. But nonetheless, this was a very popular painting, and it was released as cards and posters and such. And when Boardman was the head of New York DOT in 2001, this was commissioned right before 9/11. And it was interesting that after 9/11, these kinds of commissions dropped off very quickly. seemed more important to the railroads to deal with fear than it did to deal with hope and future. So this kind of image or project was sidelined in order to deal with the fears, indeed real fears. But it was a case of where, in terms of emotions, that negative set of feelings directed more in our country's thinking than it should have done, in my view. At any rate, this painting still lasts and still has a message. Here is one of a series for 5 that I did for the Grand Canyon Railway. As many of you know, the Grand Canyon Railway operates the line between Williams, Arizona, and the South Rim of the canyon. That's where we are here, the South Rim historic area with the famous El Tovar Hotel and the Santa Fe Depot there with the Grand Canyon Railway steam train. In 1996, the National Park Service issued an RFP for public transportation around the South Rim historic area. And the Grand Canyon Railway responded. They invited a number of people, including Runty as a historian and me, thanks, Al invited me to be a part of this, as an artist illustrator to visualize what could happen. I talked with the railroad people, Grand Canyon Railway, and their initial idea was, let's put F-40 locomotives and double-deck Bombardier commute cars on this run. And I said, and Al said, no way. There's nothing that suggests a complementary nature. You want whatever trains you put here to be almost invisible and to complement the land, to honor the land. You know, we're right back to Aldo Leopold again. So through a number of contacts here at the Washington DOT, I found out about the Siemens Regio Sprinter. And that's what we see painted in here. There were 5 paintings in the series. These were self-propelled diesel rail cars, articulated, low floor, big windows, air-conditioned, wide doors, easily accessible. They were grand. And there happened to be one of those train sets in Canada, Calgary, doing a demonstration project. So the Grand Canyon Railway people got in contact with Washington DOT and with the folks in Calgary, and they brought one of those trains down to the Grand Canyon when this whole project was unveiled. So it was very, very thrilling to see it. Unfortunately, it became a political football when the administration changed from Bush to Clinton. The Secretary of the Interior, Bruce Babbitt, was out, and with that, the option for this kind of a train service was out as well. But it nonetheless, the railroad nonetheless produced a very elegant brochure that had 5 different paintings and maps to tell the story and show how evocatively this kind of low-profile vehicle could complement the landscape and the visitor experience.
So,
I must say that of all of these forward-looking paintings that I have done and that I've showed you so far here, this set from the Grand Canyon got more and lasting exposure and produced more questions and interest to me as the illustrator than any other set of forward-looking pieces. And I reflect on that and I say, why? Well, I think it's because the Grand Canyon is such a national icon. People want it preserved. It speaks to them at many, many levels. And these images show how technology, in this case, transportation technology, can enhance that experience and how there can be a symbiotic relationship. It's as I said, the Aldo Leopold thing all over again. And so I'm thrilled to have this as part of my portfolio and to count the Grand Canyon Railway as one of these commissioning agencies that had the vision to see this, to see what it could be.
Thank you for putting all that important background information in, Mr. Thorpe, because that's just in, you said that project got lost in the transition from Clinton to Bush.
Yes.
Well, that's just microcosm to Amtrak's whole problematic story of 50 some odd years. It's because the vision of one administration is not the vision of the next administration, which might be the vision of the third or maybe not. And here you have Amtrak 50 years later, which is often a product of its worst compromises because it had no choice.
Well, and that's a sad story. That's why, I none of us can see the future. I look at this sort of long arc of history, like Martin Luther King talked of, but I see this arc across our transportation landscape and the role of the railways in the many facets of civilization. And I want this kind of imagery to have a lasting place. And I know that it speaks when you put these pieces out there.
It surely does.
That one of those Talgo train paintings was used at a Amtrak Reform Council meeting in Seattle a number of years ago, and it was on the dais. The original painting was on the dais, and the speakers were trying to get the PowerPoint system to work, and it didn't, and it broke down, and then the power went out, and then it came back, and then they couldn't get the sound hooked up to folks in Washington, D.C. who were going to be a part of this event. Anyway, it got to be rather chaotic for a while and kind of humorous. And one of my colleagues was sitting next to me, and he gave me an elbow in the ribs, and he said, "Look there's your painting sitting there, doing nothing, just has spotlight on it. And it speaks eloquently. It's not going anywhere. It's just telling its story, and everything else is falling apart." And it was kind of a fun little moment. Well, moving along here so we can wind this up. These two pieces reflect an architectural rendering style, ink and watercolor, for two different projects here in the Seattle area. One of them has happened, one of them has not. The one to the left is the downtown Seattle area around King Street Station. That's currently here. This is the Amtrak station and home of Sound Transit trains. To the left, this little red roof building is part of the old Union Station, which was the Union Pacific and Milwaukee Depot. In the old days, this was NP and GN. This was commissioned by Daniels Development Company and responsible for working on a lot of this new urban redesign. And they wanted all the train stuff shown. We also now have all these plazas and the streetcar in here. So this has pretty much happened the way it's shown in the rendering. The one on the right, it was one of a series of, probably 15 renderings, again, coming in blocks. This for a rail line on the east side of Lake Washington to connect a number of cities. It never happened and never will because most of this track was torn out. It was originally a Northern Pacific branch line and then became part of the BN system. I was working with the Discovery Institute's Cascadia Center as a think tank here in town to show how self-propelled, in this case DMUs, a diesel multiple unit, could match with buses and bike and hiking trails to link all these cities. If this had happened, we could have put a 100-mile loop around the greater Seattle basin that would have had rail and trail and connect with express buses, ferry boats, and light rail. It would have served 13 cities and could have had, bi-directional service. It all just became one of those political footballs and was kicked off the table, which is a shame. But, the vision was there.
Right.
Moving right ahead, two more pieces. The one on the left was a hypothetical piece done for the Virginia Rail Solutions, and it shows the Shenandoah Valley of Western Virginia. There's a single track NS line there right now, but the engineers who proposed this rendering wanted me to show an Acela type electric passenger train and an intermodal freight and then another electrified freight train here with some kind of I forget what kind of unit we have on it. When the painting was done and originally shown to the clients, the NS folks had a representative in the room. And apparently that gentleman bellyached about the fact that I had drawn the NS logo on the front of the locomotive. And the client said, well, that's no problem. Craig can change that. And I did. No big deal. But the NS guy complained because, well, this wasn't their idea, and they didn't want to have anything to do with upgrading their corridor beyond the single track line. One of my colleagues who was in that meeting said that the NS fellow had one other comment, and it was this. Pointing to the passenger train, he said, if this keeps up, meaning this kind of illustration and this kind of infrastructure, if this keeps up, it will mean nothing less than the passengerization of the industry.
What power in art does that?
Yes, I'll take that as a compliment, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, that's exactly what my
the passengerization. I don't know that I've ever heard that word. Okay,
I hadn't either. He was being creative, and may he be very prophetic. I don't know, but
he very well might be.
Yeah. So then, which is a good lead into the drawing on the lower right.
Well, I have to ask one question about the lift, sir.
Yes, sir.
If I'm not mistaken, on that freight train, isn't that a passenger car behind the locomotive?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about that.
That is a rider coach for truck drivers who drive trucks and trailers onto this train. Now, they do this in Europe.
Yeah, they certainly do.
Why don't they do it here? And this was one of the comments of my colleague, Dr. Hal Cooper, who was part of the design and commissioned the artwork. That's exactly right. Good for you for picking that up. So on the right, we have, again, another one of a series of paintings. This was done for a group here in Washington State called Solutionary Rail, and I'm going to hold their booklet up. This is a progressive organization that is dealing with excesses in the fossil fuel world. And I am fascinated by the group because as a progressive group, they came up with, on their own, a realization for the importance of electrifying railroad corridors. And I won't go into all the details, all the different illustrations that are in the book, but they commissioned about 6 or 7 paintings that show that. And this is one of them that you're seeing on the screen. This could be a typical Eastern Washington scene where I've written in here farmers co-op and farmers fresh fruit, and there are pallets of cherries and peaches or something there being loaded onto some kind of a refrigerator car that sort of has a fleet or rather a viewliner kind of profile behind it. The idea is that rail corridors could become electrified for many reasons, but also to improve electrification services to rural communities, but also to provide the basis for electric rail transport. And if any of your readers are interested in reading this book, it's historical as well as prophetic. You can just look Solutionary Rail on your browser, and you can order that through the SR website, their office here in Washington State. But this is a case of of folks who would not typically be seen as advocates of passenger rail, or in this case, a redeveloped freight rail kind of application. But they're jumping from one discipline to another, and in that jump, I see an opening of vision, an idea to say, here's how rail applied now could meet our greater goals now. So I leave you with that image as an inspiration. The idea of looking ahead with railroad art also applies to museums. And the next two pictures will show that. This is the Northwest Rail Museum right here in Snoqualmie, Washington, just about 15 minutes from my home here in Bellevue. And this is a 5-mile line that connects North Bend, Washington with Snoqualmie and Snoqualmie Falls, the first hydroelectric plant. And it is a former NP line. Right now, the museum has a number of historic and then new buildings. Off to the left are a couple of their display buildings that have been around for a couple of years, and they've just done a marvelous job of setting that up with an education center. What I'm showing here is a proposed display roundhouse. This is exterior view and an interior view. Again, this is not an operating roundhouse, but it is a display. So we have steam engine, rotary snowplow, passenger cars. Here's a Great Northern sleeper, a big hook, shifter engine, interurban car. All these are set into a setting that will be inviting to the public. This rendering, the insert rendering, shows an interior view, again, with a passenger car, some kind of an articulated logging locomotive. Here's the interurban car on the outside, and a model railroad that depicts railroading in the Northwest. So again, this is the kind of place where this kind of art is used by the client as fundraisers, but also for their own internal design process. And then they go out and raise funds for the project. This set of images is for the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum at Washington, Pennsylvania. Again, the same kind of application. Used in sketch form, these helped the design process for the client, that is the museum board of directors, and the architects, and then became, in its colored form, these became tools for fundraising and public success and public exposure. So off to the left in this piece is the existing car barn and the old interurban station from Wexford, Pennsylvania. To the right here is the new main interpretive center. This was just opened last fall, $15 million expansion. It's absolutely grand. And this piece, this rendering, shows the interior with the roof off. So the viewer is invited to kind of get up close and personal with what all that looks like. So that's just an example of how art can have a different application, different style, but it's still casting the view forward. And coming down to the end, this is the cover of Runty's book, Allies of the Earth, Railroads and the Soul of Preservation. It's an oil painting that looks forward, but really borrows from the past, because the style is an intentional copy of the, or maybe I'll say an intentional reprise of the Hudson River School of Art from the mid-19th century. The setting is the Delaware Water Gap in Pennsylvania, New Jersey off to the left, Pennsylvania off to the right. We have a train here, what ho, painted in Lackawanna colors. That used to be the Lackawanna main line. And it's a sort of turboliner kind of thing that I'm just suggesting could be there. Griff, you asked about the two figures on the rock.
I did.
Well, that was one of the tools that the Hudson River School artists often used to, and I may have mentioned this earlier, to suggest community and also suggest the interaction of people with the landscape and those people seeing the divine thumbprint on the land, which was the imperative to treat the land with respect. So I'm echoing that technique, that device, and using it here. So even the way I rendered the trees and the brilliant sun in the background, reflected in the river, that is a reflection of the Hudson River School style. When this painting was unveiled at a party function here in Seattle, one of the guests looked at it and shouted out, "Oh, it's a Bierstadt." And he was referring to the fact that the style echoes or reprises Albert Bierstadt, one of those noted artists from that Hudson River School era. And that gentleman saw in my style that deeper message and that content and that implication. So that meant a lot to me to have that as a recognizable device and to put together, to connect those dots. Yeah. And so often it's not that people don't connect the dots, they don't even realize that there are dots that need connecting. But he did. So we get down to the last two images here. This was the Amtrak 50th anniversary painting commissioned. Again, Joe McHugh was a part of this project. And it shows Naperville, Illinois. And oh yeah, I put my telephoto brush on, and that's the Willis Tower, Sears Tower in the background of downtown Chicago. Amtrak came to me with this commission and said, "We want you to show connections." So we talked about what does that look like? What kind of connections? They said, "We would want people in the foreground, not just a train." So that's what they got. So we have here a dad with backpack and kid and a service dog, and talking to the kid is an Amtrak conductor, and she has in her hand a model of a new Acela locomotive. Here is the Southwest Chief with the new Siemens Chargers. Off to the right, regional train with Horizon equipment. We have the small town or midtown kind of station that is Naperville. Back here, of course, downtown Chicago. Off to the left, people walking along this platform. Oh, and by the way, that's Joe McHugh. I painted him into it.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm glad you told me that. Joe McHugh was a longtime vice president of Amtrak's government affairs, for those who might not have known.
So the text, the content suggests this connectivity. So we have the connections here between big city and smaller town or regional area. We have connections by older equipment and newer equipment. This train is, going across the West. So it's not just a local, it is a long distance train. We have connections of people. We have connections past and to the future. So here's the future of the Acela trains, but also this kid represents the future of generations of people who will be riding and appreciating this kind of service. So this tied together for Amtrak's needs all of those greater themes and set them in one painting. The last image that I have for you is this piece. This was not a commissioned work. I did it myself and still have the original. It's also for sale if anybody wants it, but I digress. The painting is called Will the Fog Ever Lift? And it shows the empire builder along the upper Mississippi headed south to Chicago. Will the fog ever lift? It certainly refers to the fog of the day. Because if any of you have ridden that line or driven along, you know how gorgeous the Mississippi is. And those vistas are just captivating. After one turn, after another turn, after another turn, you just are captivated. So the question is, will the fog ever lift so the riders on that train can see that view, those views? But the deeper message is, will the cultural fog ever lift? We know it blows away and then it blows back in again, and that's why it's an ongoing effort, and we need one another to keep that fog blowing away so people can see and understand this connection between rail service and urban areas and rural areas, the connection between the train and the landscape, the train as in furthering the integrity, stability, and beauty that I've been talking about ever since we got started here a while ago. All of this fits together. And it's this kind of image that tells that story, hopefully in an evocative way that does touch the emotions and brings about change. So I want to thank you, Griff. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. But I just want to make sure that you understand my appreciation for your interest in my work and its message and the timeliness of it.
Well, you're so very kind, Mr. Thorpe, but let me assure you, I'm the one humbly grateful to you for sharing your God-given talents and intellect here. And what an appropriate painting with which to end this podcast, because it is so true. Amtrak takes 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, and sometimes 2 steps backward and 1 step forward. You know, it just that seems to be the history of it. And what you've, for me, let me tell you what you've prophetically done for me with this concluding painting. You know, for years in my career, if I had $1 for every time I had a passenger say to me, why don't we do what Europe has done? And you would already know this, Mr. Thorpe, but my answer was always, well, through the Marshall Plan just after World War II, we, the American people, did this for Europe, their rail infrastructure. So the better question is, when are we going to do this for ourselves? And unfortunately, that fog maybe is not as thick as it was 50 years ago, but it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just love that. What you've given us is past is prologue, present is reality, and then you've given us the prophecy and hope for the future through your talents and intellect. And thank you for doing this. This is, I suspect we'll see. I'm not a professional podcaster by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just trying to record some accurate railroad history. And I have a feeling that your presentation and the story of your career, sir, is going to be extremely popular and extremely helpful as people begin to plan for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And all the best for what you do too.
God bless, sir.
Thank you.
The Texas Eagle Way, the way to and from and all points beyond. www.texaseagle.y'all. Come on the way, the Texas Eagle Way.